back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a complete breakdown compilation of Stranger Things. At the request of many of you who prefer to binge or watch our content in longer, more strung together forms, we have merged all of our Stranger Things breakdown into one ultimate breakdown video, plus some new observations I added after watching the Stranger Things making of documentary. So in this video, you will see our seasons 1 through 4 recap, the breakdown of season 5 volume 1, the breakdown of the play Stranger Things: A Foreshadow, the breakdown of season 5 volume 2, the breakdown of the finale, and my finale review and explanation of lingering questions. And then at the very end of this compilation, I have a new retrospective segment that includes some observations from Netflix's One Last Adventure making of documentary, and just the recovering feelings many of us have. Breaking down Stranger Things season 1 back in 2016 is kind of how I got my start as a YouTuber, and you could go back and find all those videos from younger me throughout the years if you want, but here in this video we're really just going to be compiling the more recent retrospective analysis we did in the recent months. Also, New Rockstars has some Stranger Things inspired shirts, like this Hellfire L Lives shirt, like this Vecna Puffs shirt, and other designs available at our merch store nerdright.shop, which make great gift options for yourself or that nerd in your life, and go to supporting New Rockstars directly. Alright, here we go. Starting with season 1, November 6, 1983. Will Byers goes missing in Hawkins, Indiana after playing D&D with his buddies Mike, Dustin, and Lucas. Will runs into a shadowy monster on the street and then vanishes in his backyard shed. Will's mother, Joyce Byers, begs Police Chief Jim Hopper for help. He's a Vietnam vet and he lost his daughter to cancer. Meanwhile, the three boys search for Will and find a mysterious girl with a shaved head and limited speech abilities with the number 011 tattooed on her wrist. They nickname her 11, or L. She explains by flipping their D&D board that Will Byers is in an upside down dimension and he's being hunted by a creature that they nickname the Demogorgon after the D&D figurine. Mike's sister Nancy and her friend Barb go to Steve Harrington's party. While Nancy and Steve smooch, Barb sits by the heated pool and gets taken by the Demogorgon. Will's older brother Jonathan, nearby taking photos of Will's bike crash, takes photos of the pool party and does get a shot of the Demogorgon. With both Jonathan and Nancy seeking missing loved ones, they end up striking up a friendship, but Joyce's house gets some weird staticky phone calls and flickering lights that Joyce channels through Christmas lights that she believes is her son Will communicating to her. So she rigs up an alphabet on her wall. Will spells out run and the Demogorgon crawls out of the ceiling, but then what we think is Will's body is dredged out of the quarry and Peter Gabriel's cover of Hero plays and we're all crying, but 11 insists Will is alive, as does Joyce. Hopper investigates and learns that the body was a fake. Hopper then breaks into the Hawkins lab and finds an interdimensional gateway. With the government spying on Hopper, Hopper finds Terry Ives, a woman involved with MK Ultra experiments conducted by a Dr. Martin Brenner at the Hawkins lab. We learn that Terry was pregnant and thought that she had miscarried, but the baby lived, a baby that would have been named Jane, taken by Dr. Brenner and turned into the girl we now know as 11. When some bullies try to make Mike jump off a cliff, you know how in the 80s you really had to look out for bullies doing that. 11 saves Mike by levitating him and then attacks the bullies. Amazing group hug. And then as these kids are chased by Dr. Brenner's men, 11 pulls a reverse ET and flips the van over the kids on their bikes. The combined groups now use a sensory deprivation tank with salinated water to help 11 locate Will and Barb, but Barb, 11 reports, did not make it. Nancy and Jonathan distract the monster at the Byers house where Steve barges in thinking the two are hooking up, but then Steve ends up batting up against the Demogorgon. Brenner's agents arrive at the school, but 11 uses her powers to kill a whole bunch of them. The Demogorgon then takes out Dr. Brenner, we think, and 11 uses her psychic powers to disintegrate the Demogorgon, but really it's just sending it back to the Upside Down with her as she disappears along with it. All of this is going down while Joyce and Hopper are in the Upside Down themselves, going through the gate to find Will in the Upside Down version of the Hawkins library. Actually, season 5's opening scene, released early online by Netflix, shows that while Will was in the Upside Down, Will actually fought back against the Demogorgon in Castle Byers, bravely evaded it, but then was captured and brought to the library to have this moment with Vecna. Vecna being the big bad that this series will reveal later. So when Joyce and Hopper find Will, Vecna was like hanging out in the background there. So now we're in Christmas 1983. Things seem to be back to normal, but Will Byers coughs up a slug in his bathroom sink and mentally transports back to the Upside Down. He's still not okay. Season 2, it's now Halloween 1984, and the kids are going as the Ghostbusters. Mike calls out for 11 on the radio every night with no response. Nancy feels guilt over Barb, and Barb's parents have hired conspiracy theorist Murray Bauman to hassle Hopper for answers. Joyce has started dating Bob Newby. Dustin has started looking after a little slug quadruped that he has nicknamed Dart after D'Artagnan because the thing loves to eat Three Musketeers bars. This slug is much like the slugs that Will has been coughing up, and we find out that they are early stage demogorgons called Demo Dogs. Will, meanwhile, keeps having visions of the Upside Down with a smoky monster that I'm choosing to call a smoky monster because he's not named the Mind Flayer yet, and the smoke monster is something that can only exist in Lost. We learn that 11 is not dead. She transported teleported herself to the Upside Down with the Demogorgon, she crawls back to our dimension through a hole and then lives in the woods for a while until Hopper finds her after leaving some Eggo waffles out for her. The two of them end up living together in Hopper's dad's cabin. Dr. Owens, we find out, is now running the Hawkins lab. Max is the new kid at school. Lucas gets a thing for her. Max's brother is Billy, the new bad boy with some major anger issues. Billy and Steve form a macho rivalry, but Steve is just kind of worried about losing Nancy to Jonathan. Nancy and Jonathan have been spending a lot more time investigating Barb, and they end up getting a recording of Dr. Owens that they share with Murray that Barb is indeed dead. Meanwhile, Steve just ends up taking on a motherly relationship with Dustin this season, tossing some meat around the woods to find Dart while sharing some hairstyling tips. The smoky monster in Will's visions overtakes him, and then a possessed Will begins demanding that the house be kept cold, and he scribbles all these drawings that Joyce and the other adults realize connect to form a depiction of the smoky monster that he's been seeing and correspond to a map of tunnels beneath the town of Hawkins. When the lab agents burn a tunnel, Will screams in pain, and they learn that Will is tethered to the Upside Down with all of the creatures via a kind of hive mind. Actually, when it comes to season 5, the Duffer Brothers have said that season 2 episode 6, The Spy, specifically the moment when Will was brought to the Hawkins lab and it's discovered that he's either an agent or a vessel for what we then thought was just the Mind Flayer, that, they said, is a very important thing to revisit ahead of season 5. Eleven learns about her mother and gets mad at Hopper for hiding it from her, so she leaves the cabin and finds out what was suggested about her mom in season 1 is true, and then she runs away to Chicago, where she meets Kali, aka 8. These superpowered lab experiment runaways are very okay with using their powers for unethical killing, and even though they were the cold open for season 2, 11 kind of leaves them behind, and we never hear from them again. It sounds like this random episode was going to be a spin-off for another series, and due to poor reception, Netflix never moved forward on it. It's kind of unfair to use this one episode to judge all of season 2 though. Season 2, not a bad season. The hive mind controlling Will instructs Dart and the other Demodogs to attack the agents in the tunnels, and then everyone back at the lab, leaving Joyce, Bob, Will, Hopper, and Mike and Dr. Owens trapped. They sedate Will to keep the hive mind from attacking them. Bob volunteers to go down to override the security system so the others can escape, but Bob gets mauled by Demodogs. Back at the buyer's house, the group tries to trick Will and the hive mind possessing him as to where they really are, but because it's a familiar setting from the phone ringing, the hive mind that's in Will recognizes where they are and draws the Demodogs toward them. 11 arrives at the last second and wipes out the Demodogs, shocking everyone who thought that she was dead for the past year. The kids label the entity controlling Will as the Mind Flayer, another villain from D&D lore. They take Will to Hopper's cabin and burn the monster out of him, while 11 and Hopper return to the lab to close the gate, and while the other kids divert the Demodogs through the tunnels. With the heat cranked up, they're able to detach the Mind Flayer from Will, and 11 is able to psychically close the gate. The season ends at the Snowball Dance, where Mike and 11 kiss, and Will continues to see visions of the Mind Flayer. Season 3 jumps ahead to July 1985. Everyone's excited about the new Starcourt Mall, even though it means decimation of the local shops downtown. Mike and 11 are smooching a lot in Hopper's cabin, with Hopper having to establish an open door policy, with Lucas spending more time with Max. Poor Will is just kind of left as a kid who just wants to D&D with his friends. And it is further established this season that Will is not into girls. Dustin's back from summer camp with reports of a new girlfriend in Utah, whom he sets up with a communication tower to call, but no one believes him. But he does intercept a Russian transmission. Steve is working at Scoops Ahoy with his new friend Robin, and Dustin brings the transmission to them, where Robin's able to decode the message to mean some kind of Russian shipment is being sent to the mall. Billy is now the hot lifeguard at the community pool, attracting Mrs. Wheeler. She nearly cheats on her husband Ted with this kid, but at one moment she sees Holly sleeping on Ted's lap and she decides not to. I only bring up this minor subplot not just because it was iconic, but because Karen and Holly are gonna have a pretty big role in season 5. Billy crashes his car and gets dragged into an old steel mill where the Mind Flayer possesses him. Lucas's little sister Erica takes over the show now as she helps him burrow through the mall's ventilation to get to the elevator where the shipment's being sent, and down beneath the mall they find a massive Russian base. The Russians have some kind of machine to try to open another portal to the Upside Down. Nancy and Jonathan are now interns for the Hawkins Post, and they're investigating some rabid rats and find some of the townspeople have been eating fertilizer. Meanwhile, Joyce and Hopper couple off, and Hopper ends up getting attacked by this Terminator-like Russian assassin. But the reason people have been eating fertilizers is because a Mind Flayer possessed Billy has been helping the Mind Flayer flay all these people around town, with all these vines snaking back into the steel mill to connect everyone, not just through a hive mind, a telepathic one, but like a physical viney extension. So now all these flayed zombies are attacking Nancy and Jonathan at the hospital, and these bodies merge to form a fleshy John Carpenter-esque thing monster. 11 and the others send the monster out the window. Hopper learns from the mayor that the Russians have been buying up abandoned property all over town. Joyce and Hopper visit one of these properties and get attacked by that assassin again, but they kidnap one of the scientists, Alexei, a very sweet nerd who just wants Slurpees. They get Murray to translate for him as they realize the full plan is to open a new gate under the Starcourt Mall that the Russians can control. 11 connects with Billy psychically and learns that the Mind Flayer considers her a threat for closing the gate at the end of season 2. The Mind Flayer learns where 11 is and sends all the flayed back to create a fleshy super monster to kill her. And in the fight, a piece of the Mind Flayer's flesh embeds in her leg. At one point, Steve and Robin get interrogated with Russian truth serum. They're able to get away, and afterwards they question the plot to Back to the Future.
I'm pretty sure that mom was trying to bang her son.
And Robin tells Steve that she's gay, and Steve is so supportive. The kids reunite at the mall, and 11 extracts the Mind Flayer chunk, but in the process loses her powers. Hopper, Joyce, Murray, and Alexei are looking for the kids at the Independence Day fair, but the Russian assassin shoots poor Alexei. They hear a radio message and meet the kids back at the mall. The adults go down to the Russian base to destroy the gate, while Dustin, Steve, Eric, and Robin head up to the radio tower, where Dustin gets some help from his actually real Utah girlfriend Susie as they sing the Never Ending Story theme song to each other. Mind Flayer and Billy arrive to the mall. The kids hold back the Mind Flayer with fireworks, and 11 frees Billy by getting him to focus on some happy memories. Billy, finally free, sacrifices himself so the others can get away. Hopper fights the Russian assassin down below, and when it seems like Hopper is trapped by the open gate, an explosion seems to kill Hopper. And now with the gate closed, Dr. Owens and the US military shut down the mall, and the whole incident is covered up as just a mall fire. 11 leaves Hawkins with the Byers family to the West Coast, and the season ends with 11 reading Hopper's heartbreaking letter set to Peter Gabriel's cover of Heroes, including this cryptic clue to keep the door open 3 inches. A post-credits scene for this season shows the Russian base where an American is mentioned being in custody, where we learn Demogorgons are being unleashed on prisoners. Bringing us to season 4. It's now spring break 1986. Mike comes to visit 11 and the Byerses in California. Without her powers, 11 is now getting bullied by some girl named Angela and ends up hitting Angela in the face with a roller skate at the Rinkomania. Joyce learns that Hopper's still alive in a Russian gulag, having been thrown from the platform by the explosion and captured by the Russians. So Joyce and Murray connect with a guy named Enzo and set up a deal to free Hopper. So they head to Alaska with a pilot named Yuri. Back in Hawkins, Mike and Dustin have joined the Hellfire D&D club led by Eddie Munson, while Lucas tries to be a popular jock on the basketball team. Max and Lucas have broken up while Max is mourning her brother. Cheerleader Chrissy Cunningham has some disturbing visions of clocks and trees and hears a creepy voice stalking her. So she comes to Eddie for help, but in Eddie's trailer, she goes into a trance and floats, and her body is contorted in a gruesome death. Eddie flees, and the satanic panic of the town, led by Chrissy's boyfriend Jason, causes folks to blame Eddie for the murder. Dustin, Steve, Robin, and Max find Eddie, and they settle on the name Vecna for this new monster. Nancy learns about the history of the Creel family, who were murdered in the same way as Chrissy. The father, Victor Creel, is blinded and incarcerated in a hospital, believing a demon killed his wife and daughter and put his son Henry in a coma, who he thinks died shortly after, but he said a voice of an angel pulled him out of the trance, referring to his favorite song. 11, meanwhile, is intercepted by Dr. Owens to take her to a desert base to help her get her powers back. Owens is working with Dr. Brenner, who did not die in season 1, while in the sensory deprivation tank of Project Nina, 11 relives her time in the rainbow room of the Hawkins lab, giving us some interesting de-aging on Millie Bobby Brown. And we learned about 11's relationship with an orderly there. We find out this orderly is 001, and he promises to help her escape, but he kills the other child test subjects in the same way Vecna has been killing teens around town. 11 refuses to join him and psychically banishes him to a mysterious realm that we later learn is called Dimension X. There, we learn that Henry formed a link with the Mind Flayer and all the Demogorgons and other creatures of this realm. So anytime we heard the voice of the Mind Flayer, we were really hearing Vecna. And now as Vecna, Henry Creel is trying to break back into our world. Government agents destroy the Byers house in California, and Mike, Will, and Jonathan team up with Jonathan's buddy and Surfer Boy pizza coworker Argyle to drive across the country looking for 11. They end up visiting Dustin's girlfriend's house, and Susie helps him find the desert base. Will, this season, is basically just sobbing in the back seat. The crew arrives to this base right as the military is attacking the lab. 11, with her powers now restored, downs a helicopter. Brenner dies, for real this time, and then in the pizza truck, they start heading back toward Indiana. Meanwhile, Vecna has killed 2 more teenagers in the town of Hawkins, and Max realizes she has the same symptoms of the last 2 victims, so she visits Billy's grave and then goes into a trance from Vecna. Her friends apply the favorite song logic and use Max's Walkman to play Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, and it creates an opening, and Max runs for it and escapes. Meanwhile, in Russia, we find out Yuri has betrayed Joyce and Murray. Joyce and Murray take over the plane and crash land in Russia, and Murray disguises as Yuri to go into the Russian prison. They find Hopper in a Demogorgon pit with other prisoners, and Joyce and Murray help Hopper break out as he's fighting the creatures. Joyce and Hopper briefly hook up. In this lab, these adults find other upside-down specimens, including a piece of the Mind Flayer. Learning what's going on and a call from Dr. Owens, the adults break back into the prison to fight as many upside-down creatures as they can to distract the hive mind. Really, this whole Russia subplot in season 4, not my favorite, and it kind of seems like season 3 was going to be the ending of this series, but it did so well, and Netflix is like, you have to keep making content. So they kind of had to write their way out of this stuff. So back in Hawkins, the kids realize that the murder sites all have gates there. Steve, Nancy, Robin, and Eddie get trapped in the Upside Down while swimming to the bottom of Lover's Lake. In the Upside Down, they realize that the whole Upside Down was really frozen on the night of November 6, 1983, making the Upside Down a kind of snapshot dimension that Eleven really created when she first opened that gate with Dr. Brenner in season 1. The older kids meet up at the gate in Eddie's trailer to try to get back through, but Nancy falls into a Vecna trance where Nancy learns that Vecna is Henry Creel, and he shows her a vision of Hawkins fully destroyed. He says he needs 4 kills to open the giant gate, the 4th kill being Max. The group plans to lure out Vecna to kill him using Max as bait in the attic of the Creel house. Eddie and Dustin rip an awesome cover of Master of Puppets in the Upside Down to distract the hive mind and all the demo bats so that the other kids can attack Vecna when he's in his trance. Poor Eddie ends up dying an epic death. Meanwhile, the other 3 attack Vecna with guns and Molotov cocktails. Eleven and the West Coasters, realizing they're not going to have enough time, find a local Surfer Boy pizza shop where Argyle sets up a makeshift salt tank for Eleven to mind fight Vecna. Chrissy's boyfriend Jason shows up at the Creel house at the wrong time and thinks Lucas is doing a satanic ritual on Max. Max's Walkman gets broken in the fight. Meanwhile, Mike tells Eleven he loves her, which gives her enough of a boost against Vecna, but without her Walkman, Max seems to be killed, and a huge rift is open with an intersection directly at the Hawkins library. But back in the Upside Down, Nancy, Steve, and Robin blast Vecna out the window, but in Michael Myers fashion, the dude's gone when they go look. Eleven uses her powers to bring Max back to life, but the rift is still open. Days later, the news is trying to say this is an earthquake, but at this point, the Hawkins families are like, nah, we're not buying it this time. They start to get out of Dodge. Max is still in a coma. The family and friends reunite. The kids are overjoyed to find that Hopper is alive, but spory ash from the Upside Down begins to rain down. Will touches the back of his neck as they all run up that hill, and they see rifts spreading all over the town of Hawkins. Okay, now we're gonna go into our breakdown of Stranger Things Season 5 Volume 1, Episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And yeah, I'm gonna be keeping in all of the theorization that this would lead to time travel or some kind of big twist as to why there seemed to be no water in the Upside Down. All kinds of theories that we now know were inaccurate, but I still think it's pretty fun to relive the speculation, warts and all. Enjoy. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. This past year was a lot. If you're coming into 2026 feeling a little heavy or feeling overwhelmed by a pattern of feeling overwhelmed, you're not alone. We can all use a little support from time to time. And one of the things I rely on to help me unpack everything and feel lighter is therapy. It's a great long-term source of tools, insight, and emotional grounding. It's just the thing I need to balance out the existential spiral I get from reading the news every morning. BetterHelp sponsors a lot of videos on this channel because therapy helps so many of us here at New Rockstars feel lighter than we would otherwise. BetterHelp doesn't just give you access to therapy, it helps you start therapy. You fill out a short, thoughtful questionnaire where you can share your goals, preferences, and what you're looking for. BetterHelp uses those insights along with years of matching experience to connect you with a qualified licensed therapist who fits your needs. And if the match isn't quite right, you can switch therapists anytime for any reason at no extra cost. BetterHelp gives you access to over 30,000 licensed therapists, so you can find somebody who fits with what you need in their diverse community of professionals. With so many different specialties, backgrounds, locations, and approaches, you'll find someone who's right for you. You can have sessions by video, phone, or live chat, whatever feels most comfortable and fits your schedule. 72% of BetterHelp clients report a reduction in symptoms within 12 weeks, showing that professional support can truly make a difference. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/newrockstars for 10% off your first month and let BetterHelp support you in feeling lighter in 2026. Let's start with Chapter 1, The Crawl. We open Season 5 with a flashback to November 12th, 1983, or 6 days into Will Byers being in the Upside Down. This moment reuses shots from Season 1, Episode 7, The Bathtub, the first time we saw where Will was in the Upside Down after learning his death was faked with a stuffed dummy, and that was in Castle Byers, the fort in the woods built by Jonathan and Will on the day their father Lonnie left the family. We saw the shadow of the Demogorgon breaking through the wood to the kid, but we didn't see what happened after it cut to black at the end of the episode. now we do. And since dates are very important to this show, specifically November 6th, this being November 12th, the 6th day, in the book of Genesis, that's when God created man. And if you consider Vecna the god of this dimension, this would be the day he reforges Will Byers into a creature of his own image. We focus on the sign of the home of Will the Wise. That's Will's character name in Dungeons & Dragons, and Will being the sorcerer will be something that this first half of the season manifests. Just as he was in that season 1 scene, Will sings the Clash's Should I Stay or Should I Go? That's the record Jonathan played for Will to drown out the sound of Lonnie and Joyce fighting. The producers de-aged Noah Schnapp for this new expanded scene using some VFX on top of the faces of some stand-in actors. The shots of Will inside Castle Byers and later when he's glued to the wall in the Hawkins library do look better than the shot of him atop the tree, and it's because the artist had more reference images of the younger actor from those season 1 scenes compared to these new ones that they had to create that do admittedly look a little uncanny valley. For the stand-ins, they used younger actors Luke Kokotek and Miles Marthaler, and Noah Schnapp told SFX magazine how he had to coach these young actors on how to breathe like he did at a younger age and other specific mannerisms, and how it amounted to a kind of out-of-body experience for him, or you could say a bit of time travel. Whereas Will was unable to pull the trigger of his rifle against the Demogorgon in the backyard shed, now he does, and he gets a clean shot at it before taking off running. This is far more active and heroic than we all assumed Will was during this time, and it sets up the character to be more of an empowered hero in this final season. The Duffers confirmed before the season that the creature Will nearly ran into on his bike on the road was not Vecna, it was Demogorgon, but they did reveal that there was someone who telekinetically unlocked the latch on the shed, and that was actually Vecna.
They don't have telekinesis. We were unlocking doors, we were messing with the light.
Right.
That had to have been Vecna.
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say, but yes, you're very correct. The Demogorgons do not have telekinesis. So that only leaves one option.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a confirmation in my eyes. I'm just gonna say that's confirmed, okay?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we can confirm it right now.
Now, we did not see this in the Upside Down in season 1, but now the dimension is flashed with red lightning, which is the designer's way of showing that Vecna was stalking this whole area the whole time. Vecna's red lightning streaks perfectly cross the sky on Will's heroic leap, almost like a camera flash of Vecna spotting Will. Will falls and the Demogorgon drags Will to the Upside Down version of the Hawkins library. This is the same structure that the Max Z opens into years later, and it's where Joyce and Hopper are going to find Will in season 1. But that would also mean that Vecna might have been in the shadows during that rescue, watching, wanting his old classmates of Joyce and Jim to take the Byers boy back to the other side. The Demogorgon bows as Vecna steps forward, commanding the tendrils of the Upside Down to latch onto Will's face and pump seeds from these pods into his mouth. These will be the source of the slugs so later cough up Christmas time that will turn into Demo dogs in season 2. The visual of the seed snaking through the tube recalls the thorax of the Xenomorph Queen in 1986 Aliens, pumping eggs through that. Now I know the crawl of this episode's title refers to this mission, but it's also kind of what this seed is doing. Vecna says,
"At long last, we can begin. We are going to do such beautiful things together, William."
This suggests that Vecna has been planning this for quite some time, maybe even since 1959. We see tears leaking down poor Will's face as this is happening to him. Jumping ahead to the present day of November 3rd, 1987, 3 days ahead of the 4th anniversary of Will's vanishing. Holly Wheeler, now played by Nell Fisher, looks out the window to see Mr. Whatsit, her imaginary friend who we only see as a creepy silhouette blurred by the sprinkler water on the window. Water could be a very important key to all of this. Various observers have noted that there doesn't seem to be any running water in the Upside Down. Steve Harrington's pool in season 1, empty. Lover's Lake on the Upside Down side in season 4, empty. Could this be why that wall sizzles when Lieutenant Akers pees on it? Could all this come down to the logic of M. Night Shyamalan's signs? Even Mike seems to set up this certain fluid.
Meter, I'm gonna take a piss on the floor right here. Sorry, Mrs. Byers.
Whiz away.
Whiz away? Kind of like the mom's dying words and signs of swing away as a clue to Joaquin Phoenix to swing away at the water glasses to burn those aliens? I mean, later in this episode, Mike even tells Eleven he dreams of a happily ever after based on his D&D campaign epilogues with the home of 3 waterfalls. Lucas tells us that there are no coincidences. And while this P theory is kind of gross, I'm gonna keep the door open 3 inches there. Since the ending of season 4, the Byers have moved in with the Wheelers. The music here is Kids, Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein's track from the opening minutes of the pilot episode episode in 2016. Holly is reading Madalena L'Ingle's 1962 A Wrinkle in Time, which of course will be a major source text for this season. Robin has become the DJ for WSQK, The Squawk, with Steve Harrington as her sound effect guy. We learn via her exposition dump that Hawkins has been under military quarantine with metal plating over the rift open at the end of season 4. Dustin defiantly wears his Hellfire Club shirt in honor of Eddie Munson, which pisses off everyone in the school who still think Eddie was a murderer. Inside, in addition to a poster about an earthquake benefit, there's a green poster for a YMCA camping trip at Lake Winona, obviously a nod to Winona Ryder. Andy returns from season 4. He was Jason's buddy, and since Jason died with a rift tearing through his body, now it's on Andy to torment the nerds. Chance also returns from season 4 with a particularly evil Kubrick stare as Andy slams Dustin against the lockers. On the inside of Dustin's locker, there's a sticker showing the tunnels of an ant farm. It is tunnels that they're going to be using to meet to plan their crawls. We also see a missing teen poster for Jane Hopper with a number to call. 765 is an Indiana area code, and there is a recorded message if you actually call this on your phone.
Thank you for contacting the Hawkins Police Department. Due to the recent 7.4 magnitude earthquake, Hawkins is currently under lockdown to ensure the safety of our residents. The Hawkins Emergency Task Force is working closely with Hawkins PD to track down missing persons, of which Jane Hopper is a priority. We urge you, as a responsible citizen of Hawkins, to assist us in our search to locate her.
11 trains in the woods with the kind of tricky intercutting editing with guys chasing another woman, similar to that really cool edit in The Silence of the Lambs where you think it's all one location but it's actually two. 11's training outfit with the gym shorts over the sweatpants and the bandana with the cutoff top is kind of what Josh Brolin wears as Brand in The Goonies. Rocky Balboa also rocked this look. Now the trucks that chase the other woman include some with hedgehogs, as they're later nicknamed, the Sonic weapons. I'm thinking it's a Sonic the Hedgehog joke, but it would only be for us the viewers since Sonic the Hedgehog debuted on Sega in 1991 after this. Lieutenant Akers is played by Alex Bro, who played Dr. Brenner in the first cast of Stranger Things: The First Shadow on Broadway. I'm going to be talking about that play a lot in this video, but we also plan to break down that play in a separate video. And just for anybody saying this, it's not a musical. Not all Broadway shows are musicals. Watch the Tonys. Half the nominees are non-musical plays. And in this case, this play, despite not having Defying Gravity in it, rocks. 11 runs her obstacle course in 12 minutes and 33 seconds, and Hopper wants to celebrate with waffles made with waffle mix, he says, and they can't toast Eggos because they're under quarantine, so they get limited food products, but plenty of Sunny D and plenty of Gatorade. Thanks to Murray, who's running the food and supply deliveries into Hawkins using the pseudonym of Austin Milbarge, which is Dan Aykroyd's codebreaker character in the 1985 Spies Like Us film. While Steve and Jonathan's race to the top of the radio tower seems like a pointless bit of season 1 macho vying for Nancy's affections with some goofy green screen at the top, there is a shot from trailers that we haven't seen yet of some granulated smoke spiraling to the top of this same tower that makes me think the Duffers wrote this contest to establish this tower as an important set piece in the second half of the season. And I think the fact that Steve had to crank down the electric current first is also going to be important. Murray gives Jonathan a Coltrane track telling him he'll find it quite engaging with a wink, a clue that he tucked the engagement ring inside for Nancy. They all figure out that tonight will be a night for one of their crawls. Of course, the term crawl comes from D&D because a dungeon crawl is where characters will navigate a complex maze-like environment like a cave, a dungeon, a ruined building, to battle, to overcome traps, to solve puzzles, to find treasure. The snake that Dustin grabs is named Jake the Snake, named after the wrestler Jake the Snake Roberts. Robin plays Upside Down by Diana Ross as a cue to all listening that she's going to drop a whole bunch of other clues that will become a coded message for what's going to happen later that night. Hopper, Joyce, and 11 leave the junkyard via the tunnels. These are the same ones that were dug in season 2. Meanwhile, the boys meet at the same picnic table where Eddie and Chrissy met in season 4. As Mike walks through the plan to have Hopper hop onto a truck convoy during the burn to sneak into the Upside Down and search the sector looking for Vecna, Dustin says,
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy is also what Bob Newby said before he died in season 2.
Easy peasy.
This kind of clue has many nervous that Dustin might die this season. After walking through their plan, Will has a vision of the sky spinning when the other boys run up to him. I love how Lucas holds him at first, and then when Mike rushes in, Lucas backs off like, this kid's always been sick and I don't want to catch whatever he has. The spinning actually was Holly's point of view on the merry-go-round after Derek punk-ass Turnbow spun it. The teacher, Miss Harris, who comes back later in the season to chaperone the kids in the military custody, is played by Hope Hines Love, the high school drama teacher of the Duffer Brothers, who they said on their Instagram gave these two young boys their confidence confidence. We meet Major General Dr. K, played by Linda Hamilton, who, like many of the adult actors on this series, like Winona Ryder, Paul Reiser, Sean Astin, is an icon of 80s pop culture. As Sarah Connor from the Terminator franchise, she tells her sergeant,
"Please tell your commander that I am running into a wall here."
Running into a wall, choice words considering they're surrounded by a vast wall here in the Upside Down. Back in Hopper's cabin, in his bedroom with Joyce, we see a close-up of his knife that he sheathes. This will be the knife that he stabs into the Upside Down wall that Lieutenant Akers will find. When Joyce walks out, Hopper pulls something out of a hidden compartment in the wall. These are the explosives that he will later strap to his chest. Mike presents his sister Holly with a D&D figurine, a cleric that he calls Holly the Heroic.
She can cast a dimension door, which can teleport you to anywhere you visualize.
There is a shot in the trailer that might show one of Holly's dimension doors. Will and Lucas sit beside Max as she rests in her coma. Over her bed, Lucas has pinned the drawing that Max made in season 4 of the two of them going to the movies together. Vicky returns from season 4 from the Hawkins marching band, now to be a candy striper and the object of Robin's affections. Robin tells her,
Okay, so I have good news and I have bad news.
Okay, what are you doing
And as a
here?
good friend once said, bad news first, always.
oh, the good friend Robin is referring to was Eddie, who said this back in season 4.
Bad news first, always.
But Robin's good news is she's taking Vicky to Enzo's. That's the Italian restaurant where Joyce stood up Hopper in season 3. They kiss, and with the door open 3 inches, Will sees and drops his soda can. Dustin goes to clean Eddie's headstone, but realizes it's not paint, it's the blood of Jake the Snake. And he says,
"You should really keep a better eye on your pets, Henderson."
Also, Dustin's cat was eaten by Dart in season 2. He really should keep an eye on his pets. Jonathan takes over for Dustin in the squawk van with Steve to track Hopper's telemetry signal. When Steve adjusts the antenna, we cut back and forth to the meter, and the final time we cut to it, it starts at 88 decibels and then goes up to 90. The number 88, given how these episodes reference Back to the Future and the flux capacitor, it's just a key number to keep in mind, especially since a few minutes later in this episode, 88 decibels is a number we cut away from when Jonathan is waiting for Hopper's signal to pass them. 88 miles per hour. We are going back in time. I know it at some point this season. Hopper comes up from a tunnel into the Radio Shack in the downtown area near the Max Z. This is the same Radio Shack where Bob Newby used to work. They wait for the burn to commence, creating a thick cloud of smoke through which Hopper can sneak into the truck and catch a ride into the Upside Down. But Will experiences demo vision as a Demogorgon attacks Hopper's convoy, and he sees the next target, the Wheeler House. We intercut between Ted's golf club and Karen's wine, the two weapons each parent will be using to attack the Demogorgon. We actually got a sneak peek of Ted's use of the golf club in a Target commercial before the season premiered. Holly has on her walls posters for Rainbow Bright, which is also her sheets, as well as Alf and An American Tail, which is fitting because she's going to spend this season separated from her family. You know, her heart somewhere deep down is singing somewhere out there. On to chapter 2, The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler. As poor Holly Wheeler gets thrown around a room, Karen preps a bubble bath listening to Fernando by ABBA. There was something in the air that night, the stars were bright. Also hints at the shifting air from the opening portal, and the brighter stars could be kind of the lights in the light bright in the rooms burning hotter than normal. We follow Holly in a relatively long tracking shot, making several turns from her room down the hall into their parents' room, then to the bathroom, just reminded us of how 80s suburban upper stories did have lots of turns like this. Perhaps another clue of the Demogorgon's resistance to water, Karen and Holly hide under the soap suds in the bathtub, and while the Demogorgon looks down at that bathtub water, it doesn't actually touch the water. Ted gets a solid thwack with the golf club, but the Demogorgon slashes at him and sends the dad crashing through the wall into Mike's bedroom. He comes out through the closet and passes the opposite direction from the one-way sign on Mike's wall. Nice touch there. The Demogorgon smartly uses portal logic to hunt Karen and Holly. It gets them to run down the stairs, but then it retreats back into a rift to the Upside Down and then cuts them off by coming out of the door they were going to try to run through. Karen pulls an Ellen Ripley from Aliens, or I guess you could say a Molly Weasley from Deathly Hallows.
Stay away from my daughter!
Karen smashes the wine bottle and bravely stabs it at the Demogorgon, but the Demogorgon slashes her neck and drags Holly through a rift. 11, without hesitation, goes after them. As Karen and Ted are wheeled into the ER, we learn Karen is 46 years old and Ted is described as, quote, late 40s, so it shows that both could have been in high school at the same time, despite many thinking he was significantly older. So when we see that play flyer later, it tracks. Nancy believes that Vecna is realizing his vision when he showed Nancy the vision of Karen, Ted, and Holly all dead back in season 4, but Lucas counters that Vecna would have finished the job. So it tells us that when Vecna walks away from Will at the end of this half season, leaving Will alive must have been part of his plan. In the kitchen crime scene, I like how in addition to Karen's blood on the floor, there's a good amount of Demogorgon black blood on the fridge. 11 runs into Hopper and reports what happened.
A Demogorgon. I know, it's bleeding. She must have heard it.
What? Who?
Karen, with her wine.
What?
But hey, wine is mostly water, right? Joyce talks to Will about his now memories, referring to Will's Mind Flayer visions from season 2, but Will explains that these visions are more intense and that his connection to the Mind Flayer was never truly severed, and that while they were in California, the feeling went away, but as soon as he got back to Hawkins, the feeling returned, telling us that it is proximity-based. Steve and Jonathan get a battery jump from the sister of a girl Steve stood up multiple times. On the passenger side dash, there's a bumper sticker reading, "Repent! Halley's Comet is coming!" Halley's Comet went past the Earth in 1986, ending around April 1986. That would have been around the time season 4 was taking place. Mike passes the hospital playroom and sees the same copy of Madeline L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time, and he remembers how in the book it's not Mr. Whatsit, it's Mrs. Whatsit. So in A Wrinkle in Time, Mrs. Whatsit is one of the 3 celestial beings who guides the kids. So naturally, Vecna would take that benevolent form to Holly. I'll get into the other parallels as will come up this season, but one thing I'll note about A Wrinkle in Time is that how the evil giant brain that seeps into people's lives and plunges everyone into darkness, if that analogy holds true for Vecna, that might be why a lot of characters this season are in unusual emotional pits of despair, except Robin. Nothing can bring her down. Now, you could say grief and anxiety are why Dustin has lost his sense of humor, it seems, or why Hopper is planning on offing himself, why Steve seems a bit less quippy. Yeah, it could just be the collective trauma of what these characters have experienced and the people they've lost, like the kind of weight we see on the faces of the kids in the latter Harry Potter installments. It is probably just that. But I also think it's valid to interpret this as how Vecna or the Mind Flayer want all these characters to feel, and how it can really cause them to be different versions of themselves. Robin tricks Joyce by saying the always-on red light means the flux capacitor is broken, obviously recalling Back to the Future, which was Robin's favorite movie to pick apart when she was high in season 3. As Levin bandages Hopper, he recalls his reckless actions in the Vietnam War, and then remembers his brave daughter Sarah, and we see flashbacks from season 1 when Hopper read to his daughter and when she died. The railroad tracks they're walking down in this scene are likely the upside-down version of the tracks that Steve and Dustin walked down while tossing the raw meat in season 2. Jonathan and Dustin hear an odd interference over the radio that we'll later realize is the wall that surrounds the upside down. Hopper and Eleven find this wall beside an upside-down version of a billboard for Turnbow Real Estate. This wall goes up and up, seemingly without stopping, and it's made of some kind of fleshy material that regenerates, roughly on the same scale as the wall in Game of Thrones. So what is this wall, and why can Demogorgon seem to go through it, whereas no one else can? Is it a kind of cell membrane for the cancer cell that the upside down could be in Vecna's brain? Is it part of the body of the Mind Flayer? Is it kind of like the edge of the board or the edge of existence based on initial line of sight on the moment the snapshot dimension was created on November 6, 1983? Did Vecna build this wall because his intention is to remake the whole world just as the town of Hawkins, Indiana, and when that process is complete, he doesn't want anyone to be able to leave it? The Duffers have said that the Volume 2 episodes that drop on Christmas will answer the question as to what the wall is and what the upside down truly is. Mike and Nancy get to Karen and get her to write to them, and in an intercutting sequence with Will and Robin retracing the steps of Will's visions, Karen recalls that Mr. Whatsit's first name was Henry, Henri. And we end the episode with Jamie Kimball-Bauer returning as Henry Creel, aka Vecna, aka One, and now Mr. Whatsit, bringing Holly to a memory version of the Creel house. We see the rose-stained glass and the grandfather clock that played such a big role in the visions Vecna stalked Chrissy with, and the clock through which he took us back through time to reveal his backstory. Time, as we'll see, seems to be a big part of Vecna's grand endgame. Chapter 3, The Turnbow Trap. Hopper and Eleven try to stab and psychokinetically tear apart the wall to no avail. Damn it! Red lightning flashes on Hopper's angry stab there. I wonder if Vecna did feel this and the lightning was kind of like his nerve impulse reacting. As Hopper shares beef jerky with Eleven, the military blasts her with a hedgehog. Meanwhile, Joyce picks up Will and Robin, who apologizes to Joyce for her behavior.
Sorry, it must be my tone. My mother says I sound perpetually insincere.
We never meet Robin's mom on the series, so for now, I'm just gonna picture Uma Thurman, since Maya Hawke sounds and acts so much like her mother, and also a lot like her dad, Ethan Hawke, which makes these scenes extra fun considering Ethan Hawke and Winona Ryder co-starred in Reality Bites. Mr. Whatsit appears in Derek Turnbow's class. Creepy how he's just in the background there, where Derek is fixated on this shape. This is a 3D model of what's called a hypercube, also known as a tesseract, which is really our best way of conveying what a fourth dimensional cube would look like if human beings were capable of visually processing 4 dimensions. So 1 dimension would just be a line, 2 dimensions would give us 2 axes to make a square, a flat square, 3 dimensions would give us a cube, and so 4 axes, whoops, our brains can't go that that far, can they? So we use a hypercube to represent that next logical step. In theoretical physics, if three-dimensional space is measured by an x, y, and z axis, the hypothetical fourth axis would be time. A tesseract is also the term Madeleine L'Engle uses in A Wrinkle in Time for a fifth-dimensional phenomenon that allows for the folding of space-time to travel across dimensions, or tessering. In Stranger Things, we see Demogorgons and Vecna do this every time they open a rift. So for Derek to be so focused on this suggests that he might harbor some interest in the same source material as Holly Wheeler. He's just also an asshole. A love for A Wrinkle in Time could be what these younger kids all have in common. Maybe it was on Miss Harris's reading list for that semester. Since Derek and so many of the other kids all call Henry by the same name of Mr. Whatsit without any hint of judgment or confusion, I'm guessing that they all had the same reading material recently. The third episode is directed by Frank Darabont, the great director behind The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, The Mist, Season 1 of The Walking Dead. He's had a long gap between directing, and he's like, I'm coming back for Stranger Things. I want that Netflix money, and we all benefit from it. Henry serves Holly breakfast.
I thought blackberries might cheer you up a little. They're your favorite.
How did you know?
Oh, it's just a hunch. I'm good with hunches.
Many have pointed out the similarity between Henry Creel and Tom Riddle, aka Voldemort, in the later Harry Potter installments, specifically this scene from Half-Blood Prince with Slughorn.
By the way, thank you for the pineapple. You're quite right. It is my favorite. But how did you know?
Intuition.
Though I guess it does kind of help that Jimmy Kimmel Bauer played young Grindelwald in Deathly Hallows Part 1. Lieutenant Akers radios in that this area of the wall is called Checkpoint H for Hercules. In the NATO phonetic alphabet that the military uses, H is hotel. So I'm curious why they're using Hercules for H. Maybe all the checkpoints are named after Greek mythological figures and we could get a checkpoint T for Thessal Hydra. But with Hercules comes another number 12, as there were the famous 12 labors of Hercules. Maybe that number 12 is meant to correspond with the 12 captives and the 12 markers of an analog clock that we think Vecna is building. Also, in February 2024, Rostuffer posted a photo of a map of the heart-shaped Lover's Lake labeled H. So maybe the wall, or this part of the wall, is actually a kind of dam that's keeping something else out of the Upside Down. And maybe the reason there's no running water in the Upside Down is that it's all a flood basin that's been drained and dammed up. I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. We see here that the Turnbow billboard reads, "Coming soon, summer 1984, Greenridge Estates." Since the Upside Down was frozen in time on November 6, 1983, this billboard was promising a new suburb development to open the following summer. So why does the Hedgehog Sonic device paralyze Eleven? Well, it's kind of similar to the Sonic canon in the MCU that weakens the Hulk. If Eleven's psionic and telepathic powers get flooded like this, she just gets overwhelmed and is unable to move. The Turnbow billboard gets shot up. A little setup for how this family's home is going to get torn up later this episode. Hopper tosses Murray's lettuce grenades and gets a clear shot to take out the Hedgehog so Eleven could finish the job. The rest of the group plans to save Vecna's next target, Derek Turnbow, by kidnapping him from his home, relocating him to the McCorkle farm, and blindfolding him so Vecna won't know where he is. Meanwhile, Holly lives her best life in the memory Creel house, baking a chocolate cake and watching old TV shows on the 1950s TV set, because here in this memory, she ain't getting MTV. As she tries on dresses and twirls, the first outfit we see is this pale yellow dress. It's the same outfit that we saw Henry's sister Alice Creel wearing in season 4. Henry, you freak! Clearly part of his interest in taking Holly first is because she reminded him of his sister. But then as Tiffany's "I Think We're Alone Now" hits the chorus, Holly sees herself in a blue dress that seems inspired by Alice in Wonderland. Speaking of Alice, I mean, she basically is Alice in Wonderland in this surreal world. Would that make Max the Mad Hatter, the White Rabbit? We'll find out. But hey, when it comes to "I Think We're Alone Now," if Kate Bush is running up that hill and other personal anthems are paths to freedom for Vecna's victims, why supply Holly with her favorite music? Is this actually his own personal track that he uses as a siren call, as a substitute for his victims so that they don't seek out the real songs that are closer to their hearts? Because think about it, it's kind of hard to hum two different songs at the same time, unless they're like TikTok mashups or, Taylor Swift songs that sound like a lot of other songs. Holly sees a framed photo of the Creel family, Victor, Alice, Henry, and Virginia, on a family trip to the Nevada area cave that will become important. Henry is wearing his Boy Scout uniform. Holly goes into Henry's room and finds his uniform and his Captain Midnight telescope. This is all more stuff from the play. The First Shadow. Young Henry, in 1953, living with the Creel family in the nearby town of Rachel, Nevada, explored this close cave with his spyglass. But in this cave, he found equipment stolen from Dr. Brenner's Nevada experiment, which transports Henry to Dimension X. He dropped that spyglass and was missing for 12 hours and returned wholly changed with a new personality and a new blood type. That's what the caves are all about later when Max says that Henry couldn't follow her in there. It's where Henry lost his innocence and where he was first exposed to the Mind Flayer in Dimension X. Captain Midnight, by the way, was a 30s and 40s radio show turned into a film and TV character in the 40s and 50s, and Midnight, being the name there, might connect to Vecna's clock plans. Many have noted the odd shape of the opening of the telescope lens lens cover and how it matches the cave opening of the lookout point when Max shows Holly the surrounding vista. Some are also going as far to say those arches and the downward dip in the middle where they meet is also the general shape of the Mind Flayer. And if you really squint, Will's drawing of Vecna's innermost hive. I don't know about those last two, but I definitely do see an alignment of the telescope lens cover and the cave opening. So what's this all about? Is Holly, and I guess Max, peering through Vecna's eyes in the same way Will is peering through his eyes? Can Vecna only see this cave from a distance as if from a telescope? Either way, I think this telescope will be how Holly, as a D&D cleric, creates a dimension door on any location she can see. In the map Holly finds, we later learn from Max, the last direction before the rocks is walk uphill, which is clearly a clue to Max's favorite song of running up that hill. Mr. Clark returns from earlier in the series, lecturing Erica's class.
Einstein-Rosen bridges, more commonly known as wormholes, are often depicted in an hourglass-like shape.
Mr. Clark! Mr. Clark explained to the boys in season 1 how space-time can bend to form a wormhole or a dimensional rift. Now, by showing us the hourglass shape of an Einstein-Rosen bridge, you could visually liken this to the center of the 12 spires of Vecna's inner circle. Even calling it an hourglass shape makes us think of time. Mr. Clark even sets that up here.
Just think of all the places mankind could go. Another galaxy. Another time, even.
Having the word time be brought up as a throwaway off-screen line feels like a clue to me that time travel is going to be part of Vecna's endgame. But Mr. Clark also warns,
if wormholes did exist, they would be extraordinarily unstable. Their enormous gravitational force would rip them apart at the very moment they formed.
So this might be telling us why Vecna is approaching his wrinkle in time the way he is. Maybe using troubled kids as these kind of batteries is like the most stable way to do it. Erica tells Lucas and Mike that her falling out with Tina happened 12 days ago. Again, 12 time! Doris, the nurse who refused to let Nancy see her mom in episode 2, is more than happy to let Robin through because Robin is nice and brings snacks. Will asks how Robin knew that Vicky liked her back, and Robin says to look for the signals, little physical contacts, looks, until that snowball becomes an avalanche. I really appreciate how this season explored the spectrum of gay courtship when it comes to the gender divide in 1987. Because of AIDS and various cultural stigmas and misunderstandings around the disease, gay men and gay women just had different approaches when it came to courtship. I still believe that there's a valid interpretation of Vecna and his bloody nature and his whole MO as a metaphor for AIDS in the 1980s, even if the show doesn't verbally explicitly say that's what it's about. Murray brings them a child-sized CPR dummy, which Jonathan grabs, recalling the way Will's death was faked with a child-sized dummy. When lightening the vehicles, Dustin looks over at Steve's BMW.
What are you doing? Henderson, I'm using that.
The yellow, oh yeah, needle drop is a nod to Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Specifically the way they would look over at Cameron's dad's 1961 Ferrari. Hopper and Eleven interrogate Lieutenant Akers, while Eleven tortures him as she probes his mind to see the vault door where Dr. K is keeping some secret weapon. But when Eleven tears it open here, all we see is a mystical energy that looks a lot like what Nancy and Jonathan see in a trailer shot that we haven't seen yet in this show. When Holly grabs something from the closet, on the left wall is a framed picture of Alice in Wonderland with the hair and the Mad Hatter, among which she wears outside is Henry's old merit badge sash, which includes Boy Scout merit badges for cooking and camping. Derek Turnbow plays the 1985 Nintendo game Ghosts and Goblins. This could be another time travel clue, because in this game, when you reach the end, you actually get sent back to the start of the game to reach the true ending. Tina and Derek's run through the house gives us the geography. They run on the living room floor while the dad looks up from the wine cellar below, showing us the pit that the group will later build. Erica poisons the Turnbows with the pie, but Tina won't eat it.
And I told you to eat your damn pie.
This is kind of a callback to what Erica told Eddie in season 4.
And I will sneak behind any monster you throw my way and stab them in the back with my poison-soaked kukri.
I love this nonverbal sequence of the group working together to turn the Turnbow house into a Demogorgon trap, Home Alone style. Steve gets an axe as a weapon and then looks lustily at a chainsaw, kind of like Butch in Pulp Fiction in the pawn shop when he switches from a chainsaw to a samurai sword. Robin wears a Tom Waits shirt plus a leather jacket combo that Winona Ryder famously wore in the late 80s, though this shirt is a different Tom Waits shirt. Maya Hawke apparently requested this exact outfit. Over at the barn, Joyce asks Will,
"Where's your coat?"
It's in the barn.
This is a huge clue. Will doesn't feel the need to wear his coat because, as we learn in season 2, the Mind Flayer likes it cold. Robin establishes that Steve's uncle is a defense attorney who defends rich douchebags. I feel like that's gonna come back in some way. The Demogorgon rifts into Derek's room and uncovers his Masters of the Universe bedspread. The kid's plan mostly works and the Demogorgon flips back. The telemetry meter creeps just past 88 to 89. There's 88 again, but the Demogorgon changes vector since Derek woke up and got his blindfold off. This episode ends with Holly walking walking up that hill toward the rocks where she passes 2 scorpions. I suppose these are meant to show how terrain-wise we're now in the Nevada desert. Holly drops the spyglass at the mouth of the cave, just like Henry Creel did before he was taken into Dimension X for the first time in the play. That spyglass is how Dr. Brenner would later find him in Hawkins. But the mystery person whom Holly finds is Max! Bringing us to Chapter 4, Sorcerer. Derek recalls Will Byers as Zombie Boy. That's what the kids at school called Will in season 2. The Vecna arrives and Joyce goes full Jack Torrance and like fellow mom Karen Wheeler. But then Steve runs it over, and due to the proximity, Will feels that pain. As the car plows into the Upside Down, Will's hive mind vision continues to show the Vecna's inner lair, with 3 other kids plus Holly Wheeler all entombed by that reddish pinkish flesh with toothy stalagmites. This is where Holly and the other kids' physical bodies actually are, while their minds are in Henry's mindscape. This could be the Dimension X form of the cave that Henry Creel was first transported to in 1953, or it could be something new that Vecna is building. Debbie Miller watches the 1963 Disney The Sword in the Stone, another example of a Vecna victim loving some kind of fantasy or sci-fi lore, but I'm also reminded of Mark Twain's 1889 A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which was one of the earliest examples of time travel fiction. Maybe the earliest, unless you count Rip Van Winkle or A Christmas Carol, because it predated H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. The Upside Downers drive through the Upside Down Roan Cemetery, which they say is near the county line, before smashing into the wall. So we're getting a sense of geography, and we know that Hopper and Eleven will meet up with them based off of a trailer shot of Eleven smashing through some headstones. Just as he scribbled the depiction of the Mind Flayer in season 2, now Will Byers paints what he saw of Vecna's inner lair with its 12 spires for the 12 kids that Vecna is abducting. I do really like this theory that Vecna is building a kind of 12-spoked analog clock structure to open a wrinkle in time and go back in time to the night of either November 6, 1959, the night of the fateful play in the first Shadow play, or sometime earlier. The structure's inner column is the hourglass shape of the wormhole Mr. Clark drew, and I think this slot would be reserved for Vecna himself or maybe Will as a kind of cockpit. I am a little concerned that Robin is angled in the beam of light here though. I'm not sure what to make of that. Max brings Holly into her cave home using the knowledge that Nancy stopped Mike from getting a hot orange mohawk on his first day of high school. Hot orange mohawk? Didn't one of Collie's friends have that in the season 2 episode? Max says that she and Holly are in a memory contained within 1,000 other memories, a prison. This is Henry Creel's mindscape. The Nevada cave is the one memory Henry refuses to revisit because it's where he lost his innocence, and it's where Henry Creel, the sweet innocent boy that he was really lost in that moment. As the others form a plan to free the 73 detained kids, Robin recalls the events of the Great Escape, and now they nickname the escape tunnels Tom, Dick, and Harry. Max explains to Holly where she went after her death and the start of her coma. Max first found herself in the Rainbow Room in the aftermath of the patients and orderlies that Henry Creel killed. But then the memory opens to Hawkins High School, 1959. We hear Shaboom, Life Could Be a Dream by the Chords, you know, the song from Clue when they were all trying to fool the cop. Teenage Joyce, here Joyce Maldonado, hands out flyers for a production of Oklahoma dated November 6, 1959, starring James Hopper Jr., Karen Childress, Patty Newby, Alan Munson, and Ted Wheeler, with Henry Creel as Curly. Curly, of course, is a villain character of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Oklahoma. This is, of course, directly from the play Stranger Things: The First Shadow. In this play, we learn that Henry Creel was in high school at the same time as Joyce, Hopper, Nancy, Mike, and Holly's parents, Karen and Ted, as well as Eddie Munson's father, Alan, and also Lonnie Byers, who is Jonathan and Will's father. Joyce told the school that she would be staging Oklahoma, but in fact, this group was staging Joyce's own play called Dark of the Moon. So this jock that Joyce hands a flyer to is named Harrington, presumably Steve Harrington's father, or maybe his douchey lawyer uncle. But Patty Newby is a new character established in the play, the adopted sister of Bob Newby, remember Sean Astin's character. Patty and Henry develop a friendship that turns romantic as Henry tries to help her psychically locate her biological mother. But as he's doing that, Mr. Newby walks in the room and gets attacked by the psychic force that Henry's connected to, which we later learn is the Mind Flayer. The Act 2 climax of the play is the night of this stage show, which we now know here is November 6, 1959. Henry gets away from Dr. Brenner and tries to reconnect with Patty Newby as Dr. Brenner shows up, planning to kill Patty to cut off the part of Henry's heart that's keeping him fixated on this world. This all goes down in the rafters over the show, and Patty falls, and it's the last time Henry physically sees the girl that he loved. But later with Dr. Brenner, he psychically envisions Patty making it to Vegas to find her mother. Putting all this together, the theory I'm gonna go with is that Henry Creel's plan is to go back in time to either that night on November 6, 1959, because November 6th is clearly a date he considers to be sacred, and maybe his plan is to alter fate with Patty Newby in some way. Or maybe he plans to go even further back to like 1953 to stop himself from going into that cave in Nevada. Or maybe Maybe to go back even further to 1943 to stop the USS Eldridge Philadelphia experiment that the play established started all of this. Or who knows, the Duffer Brothers have said that season 5 is going to go back even further in history than 1943. So it could be like early 20th century or even earlier than that. In my In an Explained video, I talked about how this could all end up leading to a final scene where the night of November 6, 1983 didn't alter the way it did, and the 4 kids are all just going to be DH in some creepy way, continuing their D&D campaign, as everything that went down in this show would have been established to occur in some darkest timeline that they still envision and remember in some kind of cosmic dimensional echo. Now, as Max is telling this to Holly, Max says that she was in Hawkins 30 years ago as an observer. Holly jumps to time travel, but Max says she was just in a memory. But even just that being a memory in Henry Creel's mind could still be useful. Holly compares this mindscape prison to Camazotz. That's the dark planet from A Wrinkle in Time that's controlled by the It, the giant evil brain. Episode 6, which will be directed by Sean Levy, will be titled Escape from Camazotz. Max says that her mindscape was so much of a maze that she ended up right where she started, but then she heard Kate Bush.
Music has a way of finding you, even in the darkest of places.
A little later, Max explains how running up that hill nearly opened an escape gate back to Lucas in the hospital room, but then the song suddenly clicks off. This is not at the point in the song where Running Up That Hill ends. Someone shut this song off at a random point to keep Max trapped. I think we can assume it was Vecna, but could this be evidence of some future time travel here? Meanwhile, Derek Turnbow pulls off a 180 when it comes to charm. The gum that he was chewing on the way into the Max Z containment, he now uses to stick the out of order sign in the bathroom stall, maybe as a Darabont reference, the Andy Dufresne escape in the Shawshank Redemption. 11 times her leap over the fence with the lightning clash. The episode really makes us think Hopper's gonna die. The group walks down from the Squawk building to the trees, and Will and Mike have a moment. The color and lighting with these two guys shifts mid-scene.
In real life, you're more like a sorcerer, because your powers don't come from a book of spells, they're innate.
Will sees this as one of the signals that Robin talks about and tests the water by shoving Mike playfully, but he doesn't shove back. From Robin's point of view, Mike is framed with the Squawk and the radio tower directly behind his head, making him look like kind of a signal. Meanwhile, after hearing the interference that he heard before, Dustin does some basic math to deduce that the wall must be a perfect circle around them, with the center point being the Hawkins lab where this all started. Max tells Holly about her near escape and how Henry found her and chased her to the rocks, but stopped frozen before the cave. Henry's encounter with the Nevada experiment machinery and his 12-hour visit to Dimension X seems to be something Vecna may want to alter via time travel. Robin tells Will about her crush Tammy, thinking that all of her answers resided with another person until Robin found an 8mm film reel of her younger carefree self.
I was looking for answers in somebody else, but I had all the answers. Once I did that, I felt so free.
In the Upside Down lab, we get a close-up of 11's clenching fists before she powers up. This mirrors the shots of Will's hands at the end of the episode during his power-up moment. Hopper tricks Lieutenant Akers and the others by using the body of the poor scientist they found. Hopper wasn't kidding about being willing to kill 1,000 men to keep 11 safe. As they overpower Akers and Kay, 11 finds Hopper's chest explosives, and in what we think are his final moments, he does circle back again to his memories of Sarah. But Hopper returns alive and shows 11 what was really in the vault. 8, aka Kali, from the season 2 episode The Lost Sister, following 11's side quest to Chicago, everyone's favorite episode. It was a controversial subplot that we all thought that show would never bring back, but here it is. Kali, remember, has the power to manipulate perception, to cast visions in the eyes of her targets. Did Dr. K plan to use 8 to cast visions in 11's mind, like a vision of Hopper dying, to bring this girl to heal? Or could 11 and the others now use 8 to cast visions in the memories of Henry Creel in the Mindscape back in 1959 to alter the way Henry sees his own history, like visions of Patty Newby, maybe to put him at peace? Now, some online are doing some theory numerology. I didn't come up with this. I'm reading it everywhere. People are suggesting that 11 plus 8 plus 1, 001 being Henry Creel, who's now pretty much interchangeable with Will, 11, 8, and Will equals 20, as in a natural 20, a critical hit roll in Dungeons & Dragons. Remember, in season 4, they rolled an 11, which by itself was not enough to defeat Vecna in that game. 11 on her own is not enough, but 11 plus 8 plus 1 Will could be the critical hit combination that they need. Now, it doesn't line up perfectly, because if you play D&D, a natural 20 or a D20 is 1 roll. It's not like something you get with 3 rolls adding up to 20. Either way, I do like it. The Demogorgons attack the Max Z, bursting out from under the metal plates and killing soldiers left and right, everyone except characters we know and care about. Now, more Demogorgons chase Murray's truck and Lucas in the tunnel. Now, when we cut back to the Max Z, we stay in a long take with several setups over the course of over a minute. We start from a crane shot, swooping in on a Demogorgon, jumping from one level to another. Then we're down on the ground from the shooter point of view on a Demogorgon, then swing back to the people shooting, and then the camera swoops over to Mike with the kids as Mike leads them through this war zone, through the building, and then outside, where then finally they get cut off by a Demogorgon and the take ends. It's kind of like Alfonso Cuarón's arguably even more ambitious long take in Children of Men, not the car scene, but at the end of the movie when Clive Owen scrambles on foot with the others through the war zone in the third act of the film. A flamethrower burns a Demogorgon and Will reacts like he's burning alive due to the proximity of the hive mind. So do all the demos and parts of the hive mind. Intercutting with 11 slowly walking up to the vault, now Vecna slowly appears as a shadow on a fleshy membrane. This is how Vecna appears in the final stage picture of the first shadow, as a shadow on a scrim behind Henry Creel when he meets 11 for the first time. Vecna got a glow up this season. Our boy's got some thicker armor. You'll notice on his shoulders are these spiky fingers. This might be because when Max fought him in season 4, she ripped off one of his shoulder arteries. Now this armor would prevent anything like that happening. The Duffer said Vecna's slaughter here was inspired by Darth Vader's hallway killbox sequence in Rogue One, the way the sound cuts out aside from a beeping siren, and initially you just see a red illuminated shadow followed by this brutal carnage. Yeah, I totally see it. Vecna reverses the flames of the flamethrower soldier into his backpack tank, blowing that guy up. Then he magnetos out a few grenade pins and tosses those human explosives into a fuel tank. I mean, hey, considering this whole story started with Will Byers wanting to borrow X-Men 134, any and all X-Men references are worth noting. The grossest death of the Duffers tease is probably this dude whose head gets impaled Groot style by Vecna's claws. Blah. Joyce sees Vecna and there's little recognition between the old classmates. He tosses her aside and levitates Will over to him, creating a kind of Harry Potter and Voldemort embrace. Vecna explains that he chose these kids and Will to reshape the world because they're weak of body and weak of mind, easily broken, easily controlled, the perfect vessels.
Some minds, it turns out, simply do not belong in this world. They belong in mine.
By reshape the world and feeling like you don't belong in one reality, I think Vecna is really saying that he plans to rewrite the timeline using these weak outsiders who escape into their fictional Elseworlds. Will flashes back to his moments of weakness that we've seen throughout the series, and Vecna leaves him behind, clearly confident that enough of a seed was planted that he doesn't need to kill Will Byers. But Will remembers Robin's advice, and he plays the 8mm film in his own mind. Each of these moments are memories Mike, Joyce, and Jonathan told Will in season 2 to free the boy from the Mind Flayer's control. The memory of meeting Mike on the swings that we see here.
I just walked up to you and I asked if you wanted to be my friend. And you said yes. It was the best thing I've ever done.
The memory of the spaceship drawing, Joyce brought that up.
And you drew this big spaceship. But it wasn't from a movie. It was your spaceship. A rainbow ship's what you called it.
In the memory of Castle Byers, that's what Jonathan talked about.
We stayed up all night building Castle Byers, just the way you drew it.
And we see how Mike and Will first started playing Dungeons & Dragons and how Will donned the attire of Will the Wise, and boom! The frozen Demogorgon that was about to kill Mike, we realize is being floated and controlled by Will the Sorcerer. He snaps their limbs and necks in the same contorted way that Vecna killed Chrissy and his other victims in season 4, which is a troubling sign, as are his eyes rolling over white the same way we've seen Vecna's eyes. He wipes away the nosebleed the way 11 does when she uses her powers. But let's end this breakdown video on just the incredible music we hear in these final seconds. I'm pretty sure it's a modulated version of the One Blink for Yes track from season 1, the dreamy music from Dixon and Stein that scored Joyce using Christmas lights to communicate with her lost son. They were like, nah, I'm not doing it justice there, but listen to it yourself. It sounds great. It sounds like they took the instrumentation there and made it instead this triumphant arrival for Will Byers. But underscoring that is still a sense of mystery. I think Joyce is further away from her son now than she's been since season 1. And that's why one of the trailer shots, still unseen this season, has Will screaming this.
Run!
Yeah, he screams run to call back what he used those Christmas lights to spell out. R-U-N, run. Okay, before we get into our final 4 episodes, I'm gonna include our breakdown of the play, Stranger Things: The First Shadow, because this play does answer some of the big questions that get brought up in the final 4 episodes. Hopefully Netflix will do what Disney Plus did with Hamilton and put a premium recording of The First Shadow on the Netflix streaming platform. Hey, even for a premium pay-per-view cost if they really want to be greedy about it, just because I think there are a lot of people who love this franchise who cannot afford to travel to New York or London and pay for play tickets to see this apparently very important part of Stranger Things Things lore. So here is my breakdown of what happens in the play and why it's important. Stranger Things: The First Shadow tells the story of Henry Creel in 1959 when his family moved to Hawkins, Indiana, before and a bit after he kills his mother and sister, as we saw in the flashback of Stranger Things Season 4. We see how Henry meets young versions of Joyce, Hopper, Bob Newby, and others from the adult generation of the Stranger Things series, and a very important relationship he forms with the new character of Patty Newby, who could come up in the final episodes. We also learn how Henry ends up in the Rainbow Room with Dr. Martin Brenner, and how his powers originated from the Mind Flayer in Dimension X. In the New York production, Dr. Brenner was first played by Alex Bro, who cameos as Lieutenant Akers in the episodes of Stranger Things Season 5, and with details like the Play Flyer, the Captain Midnight Telescope, and the Nevada Caves that Vecna is terrified to go into. This final season is very much embracing what happens in the play as official canon, and the Duffers have even said that the final 4 episodes will have even more overlaps with the play. The play was written by Kate Treffery from an original story by Treffery, the Duffer Brothers, and Jack Thorne, who co-wrote Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. The play opened in December 2023 in London's West End, followed by a Broadway production in New York that opened in April 2025, which included some interesting changes to the show, including some pretty meaningful differences that I think they really just did to better align with Stranger Things Season 5. I've seen the New York version, and I would argue that the producers might have made those changes to just better align with the reveals that are happening in this final season. So that's the one I'm going to be sticking with, but I will be covering the big changes in this video. The play opens with a scrim projecting classified documents pertaining to Project Rainbow and the Philadelphia experiment on October 28, 1943. Captain Brenner of the USS Eldridge is skeptical that this military experiment to make the ship invisible will not work, when suddenly the whole ship is teleported to Dimension X, where the crew are killed by Demogorgons except Captain Brenner, who in the scene does mention having a son who hates him. We learn later in the play that Captain Brenner returned from Dimension X completely changed, with a new personality and a new unique blood type. Project Rainbow and the whole idea of interdimensional travel continued through the 40s and 50s in Nevada, led by Captain Brenner's son, Dr. Martin Brenner, studying some particles that had been extracted from his dad that we now believe to be Mind Flayer particles. We learned that a Russian spy was part of that project and then broke out with some stolen technology and was found in a nearby Nevada cave system. Younger Henry Creel was exploring these caves at the time and dropped his Captain Midnight Telescope as the Mind Flayer particles flowed into him, transporting him to Dimension X for a duration of 12 hours, changing his blood type and leaving him with no memory of the events. This all comes out in Act 2, but in Act 1, after the USS Eldridge prologue, we go into a Stranger Things style intro that transitions into the Creel family arriving to the Creel house and Hawkins, kind of like the scene of their arrival in the Season 4 flashback. Even the grandfather clock gets mentioned. Henry has a Captain Midnight radio that allows him to overhear his parents talking shit about him outside, about his random psychokinetic and telepathic glitches. Everywhere this kid goes, he spasms, light bulbs burst, things catch on fire, and radio interference comes through devices. So Henry goes to Hawkins High School, where, in a really fun revolving stage sequence set on Picture Day, we meet younger versions of Joyce, now known as Joyce Maldonado, who is dating Lonnie Byers, though some people are shipping her with Jim Hopper, and Bob Newby, who founded the AV Club and hosts the school's radio show, is longing after Joyce. Bob's dad is a school principal, and he has an adopted daughter, Patty Newby. Principal Newby does not like Patty. We meet Ted Wheeler, who's making out with a cheerleader, Karen, and these two are horny as hell. It's implied that Ted is pretty hung. Lucas's mom, Sue, is class president, at least in the New York version, and we meet Lucas's father, Charles Sinclair. We meet Dustin's parents, Walt Henderson and Claudia. We also meet Eddie Munson's father, Alan Munson, who, like his future son, is a pretty performative geek. Now, the London version, it has Walt who's giving Henry the tour of the school, but in the New York version, it's Sue. Most of these kids' names show up on the Oklahoma Play Flyer that Max sees in Season 5, Episode 4. But Walt is the one who mocks Henry in both versions of the show and tells everyone that he knows how at his old school in Nevada, he took a kid's eyes out. In the London version, it was implied that he just broke a kid's arm. I mean, Walt sucks in general and actually racistly calls Patty, quote, mystery meat. Henry and Patty connect at the lockers, where Patty says she doesn't know who her mom is, but imagines it's Ella Fitzgerald. Remember Ella Fitzgerald's Dream a Little Dream of Me, played in Season 4 over the Creel dinner scene? That song comes up throughout the show. The stage rotates to tryouts for the play hosted by Joyce, who says that instead of Oklahoma, they're actually going to do an original play called Dark of the Moon, which she hopes will be her ticket out of Hawkins, as she would hope to get a scholarship to an art school. The play is about a sexy, creepy witch boy who makes a deal with the devil to give up his powers to be with the human girl he loves, but ends up dooming them both. The play asks the question, can love defeat fear? A theme that runs throughout the Stranger Things series, especially in the final season. Patty reads for the role of the human girl, and for a second, Bob Newby tries to read across his adopted sister, and as we find out in the New York version, half-sister, and naturally this grosses everyone out, but then Henry shows up and nails the read, along with the song that Joyce wrote into it. Bob Newby does the kind of radio DJ shtick that Robin does as the Squawk host in Season 5, which is interesting because in a photo of Erica and Lucas for the final episodes, Erica is holding a newspaper clipping tying the school AV club to WSQK. While Henry in the attic overhears his parents arguing about him, he blindfolds himself and goes into the void. It's really cool. Red neon lines slide down the stage frame, reminding us of the glowing red lines of the Stranger Things title sequence on on Netflix. There's now a cool effect where the reflection of Henry is shown in the watery distance as a wisp of mind flayer particles float around his body. Henry astral projects to Walt and Claudia in Walt's parents' liquor store, arguing about her cat Prancer, but as Henry pets his kitty cat, it floats up and the poor thing's bones crack like the victims of Vecna. Henry comes out of the void with a nosebleed, hoping it was just a nightmare, but the next day at church, Claudia shows up with Prancer in a bloody bag, offering a reward to whoever could figure out who killed the cat. Oh, poor Claudia and her son Dustin. The cats of this family are cursed. Hopper, needing cash, takes her on in this mystery. Patty overhears Henry worrying about his dream being real, and then they have kind of a confession off where they each one up each other with how they just feel like awful outcasts. Henry invites Patty to help make her dream a reality, finding her mom, and the scene transitions into a visualization of a Las Vegas show where both Henry and Patty actually take part in a dance number, and Patty's mom sings a stagey version of Dream a Little Dream, but Claudia says this is Henry's dream, not hers. Henry's mom, Virginia, forbids him from talking to Patty ever again, worried that this girl could be leading Henry to using his freaky powers even more. We also see Victor Creel connect with Robert Newby over their military service. 9 days later, Bob reports on his radio show that now 5 pets have been found dead. Hopper and Bob dig up Prancer to see that its eyes were gouged out, meaning a person must have done this, not another animal, and they also connect that all the dead pets belong to kids in the play. Hopper interrogates the drama geeks during trust exercises that Joyce is putting the cast through. Alan Munson rocks a Mark from Rent scarf, while Henry avoids questioning and flees to the bathroom. This is the creepiest part of the show. The lights flicker and Henry is haunted by ghostly reflections of himself in the cracking mirror. Patty walks in, and soon Henry realizes this ain't Patty, this is a nightmare vision of Patty, taken on by that entity who promises Henry that they're gonna kill a lot of people together. She starts pulling her hair out and singing demonically. Henry stabs this vision, and the lights go out, and then creepy Patty just gets even creepier, jerking her body around and saying, "Do you want to know what Patty feels like from the inside?" And then the lights go out again, where a transition must have happened with a body swap here, and Patty turns around where her face is flayed open, and she attacks Henry, and then the lights go off and on back again, and this nightmare demon is gone. But now, the real Patty is entering the bathroom, inviting Henry back to rehearse his kiss scene. It's the scene where her character's supposed to die, but Henry cannot take it, and in front of the whole cast, Henry breaks down as the real Patty tells him it's okay to not be normal, and what if everything he hates about himself isn't a mistake, it's a miracle. Joyce says to go with this, and Patty and Henry kiss, and the light bulbs pop, and Joyce goes, "Fuck yeah!" They all celebrate at Melvald's diner. Hopper suspects Alan Munson is the pet killer, foreshadowing how his son Eddie will also be falsely accused of crimes, but Alan's dog was also killed. Henry and Patty get closer during this. Hopper and Bob realizes that all the killings are happening when static interference hit his radio show. Virginia confronts Henry in the attic, slapping her son, and he says, "You can't tell us what to do anymore." And she's like, "Us?" But Henry laughs maniacally and tells her, "Can't you feel the fear? Like when you were little and your dad locked you in the closet and the spiders would come?" This comes from Virginia Creel's visions of spiders that freaked her out in the scene in season 4. Henry uses a kind of force to push his mother around and to close the door, and she decides, "I guess I'm not gonna go to the cops." And he rips his shirt off, and spider legs come out of his back to hug him from behind, scaring the shit out of his mom. Hopper, Bob, and Joyce use Bob's antenna backpack device to seek static. They all kind of run around during this Act 1 climax, mostly to set up transitions for other parts of the show. They follow the static to the Creel house, where Victor Creel freaks them out into thinking he was the pet killer before he runs off. Meanwhile, Henry and Patty arrive to this house and head up to the attic. Meanwhile, a town meeting has the parents worried about the pet killings, and Victor shows up drunk to confess to Principal Newby that he's worried he's the one doing all the killings. He's haunted by his war nightmares, and he says Virginia left and took Alice, and he reveals to Newby that Patty and his creepy son Henry are together. So in the attic, Henry lights candles and lamps and blindfolds himself to try to recreate the dream to help Patty find her mom. As Henry's body jerks, Patty hears her mom's voice over the radio. Down below, we see Henry walking around in the void in the Vegas theater as he walks up to Patty's mom, but we find out she's a nightmare version, probably controlled by the mind flayer. Principal Newby runs up from downstairs and tells Henry to let go of Patty's hand, and he grabs Henry's hand instead, forming a link that he now has with Henry. And Henry, speaking with a mind flayer / Vecna voice, throws Newby back. The light bulbs pop, and Henry floats. Now Patty finds herself in Henry's memory mindscape, where we see he actually did gouge a kid's eyes out in Nevada. Patty runs away scared. Newby ends up falling, injured, and blinded. Part of this was a pretty significant change from the London version, which actually showed Henry suspended in the mind flayer vines that also wrapped around Principal Newby and broke his bones. And instead of Patty walking through Henry's memories, Henry himself walks through them as he tries to find his happy place. Hey, maybe they changed it for the New York version to set up Max and Holly being able to walk around Henry's memory mindscape. A staged scrim now projects more headlines and documents, a newspaper reporting that Newby fell and was blinded with some inconsistencies in his wounds, a report from Project Rainbow about a test subject being found, and a report about the building of the Hawkins lab. Scientists in hazmat suits with flashlights are now walking around the aisles and up onto the stage where Henry is with Virginia as she sings the creepy "Tonight You Belong to Me" from Patience and Prudence, the song that Henry was listening to on his radio when they first got to the house. One scientist, a specialist from Nevada, removes his head covering to introduce himself himself as Dr. Martin Brenner. End of Act 1. In Act 2, we see home movies of young Henry on his 7th birthday doing that little hop that Captain Midnight does with the slogan, "Justice through strength and courage." In a white-walled holding cell, Dr. Brenner interrogates Henry about the time he went missing for 12 hours in a cave in Nevada after his 8th birthday, a memory that season 5 of Stranger Things shows with this photo where he's in his Boy Scout uniform, as Brenner agitates Henry, saying that the boy liked killing those animals and roughs up Henry. Henry loses control and a poor nearby rat in a cage accidentally explodes. Henry, distraught, jumps up and hugs Brenner, showing Brenner's paternalistic relationship with these test subjects. And that is wrong. Meanwhile, Hopper's dad gives him a black eye. Joyce is now full conspiracy mode about Victor Creel. Hopper wants to leave town to Mexico and for Joyce to come with them, but they decide to stay in Hawkins temporarily to prove that Victor did these crimes. Actually, in the London version, there was a longer scene after this where they go to the police station to tell Hopper's police chief dad their theories, and Hopper and his dad end up wrestling. Then at the hospital, Bob and Patty sit outside their dad's recovery room. Hopper and Joyce arrive to try to interrogate Principal Newby, but are unable to get into the room, so they form this little plan to get in to talk to the dad, involving making Bob look like he was contaminated with an infectious disease to cause a diversion with the nurses. That part was not in the London version either. It's actually kind of similar to what Mike and Nancy do in episode 2 of Stranger Things final season. But either way, Patty gets in to talk to the dad, who says that the shadow could see the secret that rots inside of him. He removes his bandage to show his eyes are gone, and he says he had a vision of the streets burning, and that Patty's dead, her mom is dead, everyone's dead. And he presses his fingers in his eyes and just kind of smears the blood on himself. But he does tell Patty to save the boy. But in the London version, it's a much longer scene where Newby full-on apologizes to Patty, and he says that he and his wife did not have a good marriage, and that he adopted Patty hoping to save the marriage, and the wife left anyway, and he blamed the girl for that. But either way, she definitely is adopted. And he goes further to say that the boy stopped the thing that was really attacking him, and in his blood, he draws a picture of the Mind Flayer. But in the New York version of the show, it's revealed that Patty was not actually adopted. Mr. Newby apparently slept with a student and got her pregnant, that student being Patty's real mother, and then kept that baby and said that the girl was adopted to hide the shame and, to keep him from getting arrested. That's his sick, dark secret that the Mind Flayer was able to see. Meanwhile, Dr. Brenner takes Henry's blood sample and tells him that he has a unique blood type, just like his father did. He tells Henry about Project Rainbow and the USS Eldridge. He wheels in his father, who is in kind of a paralytic state and hasn't been talking. And Martin Brenner tells Henry about the events of 1943. He also talks about the details of the Russian spy who escaped the Nevada project with a sample of what was inside Captain Brenner, and that spy died in the cave where Henry found him. Brenner says that they found Henry's Captain Midnight telescope at the mouth of the cave, and that's how they tracked him down. Yes, it's the same telescope that Holly Wheeler now finds. But then Old Man Brenner speaks with the voice of the Mind Flayer and says, "Let us in." And he tells Henry he's a god, and he grabs Henry's hand. And it seems like kind of the Mind Flayer takes over Henry's body here. And from the neural imaging device on Henry's head, on the screens connected to that, we see the Mind Flayer's body on those screens. The screens explode, and then the grid divides to form a portal to the Upside Down. A Demogorgon appears in that rift with Demobats flying behind it. The Demogorgon reaches through and pushes Brenner. The portal closes. So now this is the portal that Dr. Martin Brenner is always trying to reopen, and it will eventually become successful with 11. But Old Man Brenner was not part of the London version of the show. He was added to the New York version. The London version just delivered all this exposition from Martin Brenner himself, and I guess the Mind Flayer was already kind of inside of Henry. Bob creates another radio device for Patty to try to reach out and connect with Henry. She uses it to call Captain Midnight, and she does the slogan as she blindfolds herself, and she chats with Henry in the void, where Henry's physical body is in kind of a medical coma in the lab. Patty tries to get Henry to come to the light, but Henry's in a pretty dark place in this scene, and he says, "Maybe I shouldn't have saved your dad," because it's really the Mind Flayer talking here. And here in the New York version is where Henry, as the Mind Flayer, really taunts Patty with this truth about her mom and the illicit relationships that she had with Mr. Newby. But Patty tells Henry that she still plans to find her mother, and then the Mind Flayer disappears from this void, and they seem to have a little connection here, and Patty tells Henry to come back to town to find him. But then, coming back to consciousness, Brenner takes Henry to a room where a death row prisoner has a bag over his head and tells Henry that he needs to kill this prisoner with his powers to give Henry fuel or energy. Henry refuses at first, but as Brenner abuses him and says, "You are the shadow," Henry freaks out and blood starts to pour out of the inmate's eyes. Henry, pissed, floats Martin up through the ceiling and uses his powers to overpower the guards and scientists. He even tastes this one dude's blood and blows out his nosebleed. Blah. Backstage at the play, Lonnie mentions that Victor Creel is in the audience, and Joyce hatches this goofy plan to use Hopper to interrogate Victor with a bag over his head by staging a fake argument between himself and his dad, so Hopper kind of gets to finally be a drama geek. It kind of works, but under the hood, it's not Victor Creel, it's a guy named Victor Lancaster, the scholarship dude that Joyce invited to the play. The London version is a bit different. The interrogation goes down backstage, and it's like Lonnie Byers under the hood, not this dude. Meanwhile, with Henry as a no-show, Joyce has Bob sub in as the witch boy, meaning half-brother and half-sister are gonna play across each other. Bob takes this moment to near propose to Joyce, but she shuts that down. Now, all of this is happening on the night of November 6th, 1959, a date that we only learn from the flyer that Max sees in season 5, episode 4. That's significant, of course, because because it's the same month and day of Will Byers' disappearance in the year 1983 in the future. Of course, today, the main events of the Stranger Things Netflix series begin. And in that scene with Max, Joyce hands a flyer to someone she calls Harrington, who must be either the father or the uncle of Steve Harrington, and the older Harrington is not in this stage play, and I feel like he must have been omitted for a reason. Like, yeah, he's a jock, he's not a theater nerd, but I do think we're gonna see more of him in these final 4 episodes. Now, on that flyer, Henry is still listed as playing Curly, who is the lead character of Oklahoma. Hey, it's a part Hugh Jackman played in the 2000 West End revival. But now, free from the lab, Henry is back at his house for a family dinner before the play, but then Alice says a doctor had come to talk to their mom, and Henry goes into the void to read his mom's recent memories to learn that Virginia told Brenner everything and even said, quote, lock him up and throw away the key, and sends Brenner after the principal's girl, Patricia Newby. Snitches get their bones broken. So this gives us the context of the deadly family dinner from season 4. Henry had just learned that his mom had betrayed him, and his family was acting normal to try to trap him before Brenner could come back and capture him. So now in the void, smoky mind flayer particles waft out from his hand, and he puts his hand back into his mouth to inhale them, and whoa! Not only is there all this white smoke representing the mind flayer, a literal mind flayer in the New York production drops down 30 feet tall over the proscenium. And that part is just in the New York production. In the London version, the mind flayer just kind of appears projected on the back screen. So now as the background dinner scene features Victor stepping away to turn off that Ella Fitzgerald music like in the season 4 scene, they have swapped out Virginia for a dummy so that they could levitate her up and crack her limbs, which is what Henry does to Virginia and to Alice at this point. Although I'm saying Henry, I think we could say at this point the mind flayer has taken complete control. It's all the doing of the mind flayer. Henry waves his arms around as the mind flayer's particles flow back into his body. Meanwhile, back at Dark of the Moon, the play within the play is reaching its own climax, and Alan Munson is working the stage with his own demonic dance, the kind of thing his son Eddie is gonna love to do. There's a power outage, and Joyce has Ted, who is as naked as Karen is at this point, get his guitar out and lead the cast and crowd in Oklahoma's closing number. Joyce runs into Henry backstage and tells him that she and Hopper know everything, and Henry's like, that's too bad, Joyce. And he moves forward as if he's gonna kill her, but then she goes, your father. And Henry realizes, oh, she's talking about Victor. And then Henry just kind of maniacally tells Joyce that he can rewrite the ending, and he can see everything. And he sees the crime scene that he left behind, and his father taking the fall for it all, and Hopper and his dad at the scene. But Joyce doesn't buy that Henry is evil, and Henry says, you're a nice person, Joyce. That's how they will bring you down. You need to learn to do whatever it takes to protect what you love. And Joyce says, I don't understand. And Henry says, you will. You will. The son he will one day claim for his plans. So I think this is some important context for when Joyce briefly sees Vecna in season 5, episode 4, before he tosses her out of the way to get to Will. Does Joyce recognize her old classmate in that moment? I don't know about that. I mean, really, it was the mind flayer talking to her in that moment when he made that promise. Henry finds Patty on the catwalk of the rafters, ready to make her big winged Elphaba style entrance of the play's finale. Brenner arrives and tells Patty what Henry did and says that he's actually a weapon belonging to the US government. Patty freaks out over this and asks Henry what's really going on, and he does confess what he did. Patty isn't really sure how to respond, but as Henry loses control and a rift opens up to the mind flayer, Henry does tell Patty that she can find her mom at the Stardust Casino. Then the mind flayer takes complete control of the situation, throws Brenner out of the way, destabilizes the entire catwalk, and Patty falls. Detached from her wings connect to the ropes, and they do this really cool effect where the actress is attached to a motor track along the handrail so that she can fall in dramatic slow motion. And she does hit the ground, and for a second we think she's dead, but she is not. A series of news headlines talks about the Creel murders, Patty going missing, the Hawkins quarry opening, and the headline local research study seeks pregnant volunteers, referring to Eleven's mom, and whatever Brenner's about to do with MK Ultra. It's now Christmas 1960, and Bob's voice over the radio takes us to Hopper, now in a cop uniform, talking to Joyce, who's working at Melvald's. Joyce says she's with that asshole Lonnie Byers, and Hopper's shipping off to basic training in the morning. Now, by the way, while Melvald's is the diner here, it will become Melvald's General Store by 1983. That's going to be where Joyce is working as a cashier. So she stays with the business even after it changes its complete operations. I'll be honest, I initially forgot that that was the name of the general store that Joyce worked at, but I looked it up in our PDF space, and bam, there it was. We see Patty walking with a cane backstage at a Vegas theater and finds her mother as the mother and daughter sing Ella Fitzgerald's The Nearness of You to each other, and it's a beautiful moment. But then a scrim lowers, and we see Henry's photo labeled 001 with 9 other kids beneath him, and now we notice 008 there in particular actually Actually, I think it's the last image that stays illuminated as these photos fade. We're now in the rainbow room. Brenner says they've successfully done a transfusion of Henry's blood to 10 other kids, meaning that all those powered kids got their powers from 001 and got it from the Mind Flayer derived. The 11th kid rotates in front of Henry, shaking a magic 8-ball. Henry walks up to her saying, "Hello there, what's your name?" And then he checks her wrist and says, "11. It's nice to meet you, 11." And then he takes her hand and says, "I'm here to help you." As they walk toward the back wall, there's a jump scare flash of their shadows, but instead of Henry, suddenly we see the unmistakable silhouette of Vecna. End of show. All right, beginning with episode 5, Shock Jock. Moments after Will's triumphant reveal as a sorcerer with powers left inside him from the Mind Flayer via Vecna, he simply realizes that they all lost, as the remaining kids were taken by the demos to Vecna's lair in the abyss. Now we see Derek Turnbow and the others wake up inside Henry Creel's mindscape as Henry explains his plan using the details from Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time, which we know from the blackboard in episode 3 was part of this class's required reading, and how Henry is using all these broken kids as vessels, making them all think that they have dormant powers like Meg does to defeat the Black Thing, which is the darkness Henry Creel actually just sees in humanity, to heal the world with his world of light, drawing them together.
Your loved ones will be saved, and you will be heroes.
And on the word saved, Henry folds his hands in prayer, which connects to his Last Supper vibe as he joins these 12 kids in descending the abyss at the end of episode 7. Since the number 12 was not connected to a clock, I have to assume that there might have been a 12 disciples thing going on here. Also, him saying you will be heroes is a direct lyric from David Bowie's Heroes. The Stranger Things series has always used Peter Gabriel's slower, sadder cover of the song until the very end of the finale episode, where they use the original David Bowie version over the credits. Dr. K notices Kali's hand glitching and realizes Kali is casting an illusion, the same detail Mike will think that he sees on Eleven's hand to support his theory. Hopper recalls bitchin' as a term that 11 learned from Kali during their time in Chicago, a callback to season 2.
I don't hate it, by the way. This whole look, it's kind of cool.
Bitchin'.
Okay. Bitchin'.
Jonathan, Nancy, Dustin, and Steve aren't at the church to meet Hopper and the girls. These 4 actually went to the Hawkins lab, and Dustin explains his thinking.
You've all seen Return of the Jedi, I hope?
Yeah, it's the one with the teddy bears.
Ewoks.
Yeah, it's the best one.
Ha! Steve Harrington, as a basic 80s kid who probably has more memories of seeing Return of the Jedi in theaters than Star Wars from 77 or Empire from 1980, he definitely would have considered Return of the Jedi his favorite of that trilogy. Dustin's theory is that the flesh wall that surrounds the Upside Down is like the energy shield of the second Death Star, and that they need to destroy this energy shield generator. But of course, this is the wrong theory, and I like how throughout this show we see these nerds often getting things wrong. Holly sneaks out of the Creel house, and dipshit Derek follows them but reveals he's now delightful Derek, and he knows all about Vecna from his best friend Mike. I love how when they're all leaving the Upside Down in episode 8 in the truck, Derek gives Mike this kind of best friend wave, though many people think that there might be more to that wave. We'll talk about it later. Because this season needs every character to at least once stand in front of all the others to pitch a plan, here we see Joyce offering to pimp out her son to hack back into Vecna's mind. Then Lucas and Erica get in on it, Lucas using the kernels of a bag of popcorn and Erica finding a newspaper clipping of Dustin with Mr. Clark. There's also a headline about Mayor Klein, that's Carrie Elwes' character from season 3. Erica drinks a Hi-C Ecto Cooler, the real Ghostbusters themed flavor that for any 80s and 90s kid is the ultimate source of inspiration. Lucas says,
"My plan is faster, bolder, better."
This is a callback to the slogan for New Coke in the 1980s, and Lucas used this phrasing to describe his plan to help 11 escape the mall in season 3. Steve and Dustin are paired off together as they look through the lab.
What is it, a treasure or a magic shield generator? Keep your metaphors straight, dude.
Analogy.
This is another callback to season 2 when Dustin was explaining their final plan and Dustin misuses the term metaphor and gets corrected by Lucas.
Unless you know something that we don't, this is the best metaphor. Analogy.
Kali tells 11 how she got here. Dr. K's forces found her friends in Chicago and straight up executed Axel, the orange mohawk guy. So, Mike Wheeler, maybe it wasn't the best look. Kali explains how Dr. K kept taking samples of her blood.
And I began to think of her as a kind of vampire.
Interesting word, considering the final boss in Mike's final D&D campaign is a vampire. Maybe Mike considers Dr. K as the one last vampire that they never fully vanquished. Holly and Max find a floating door in Henry's mindscape. It's a door from her memory leading down to the Wheeler family basement. Yes, it's the same door that's the final shot of the series. And I love that it's as meaningful of a core memory for Holly as it was for Mike. In this memory, Holly was watching A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors, starring Patricia Arquette, as part of a group of Freddy's victims fighting him from inside of a mental hospital. Joining Holly in this memory is fellow Vecna vessel Mary, who has this incredible line in the final exchange of the series.
Excuse me, girls so far. If they do, it smells like roses.
Pretty creepy though to realize that several days before Holly thought she met Mr. Whatsit, he was orofarming in the rain outside her window. Like November 6th was an important day for him, but he chose Halloween night to begin his stalking. Steve and Dustin fight about Dustin worshiping the memory of Eddie Munson.
And he made a dumb call, and he got himself killed.
Ironically, Steve making the dumb call of picking this moment to have this fight is what ends up breaking the walkie-talkie that stops Dustin from being able to warn Jonathan and Nancy and nearly getting them killed. Jonathan and Nancy compare the melted hallway and the dead soldier corpses to Chernobyl, which here in November 1987 would be a nuclear meltdown disaster that the West started to learn even more details about in the Soviet hearings that were held in July of 1987, even though the true horrors of Chernobyl were even hidden from the public for decades after that. Kali reveals that Dr. K was infusing her blood into pregnant women, at least 5 of them from our count, and that these women were sick and dying along with their unborn children. Yeah, these poor women and unborn kids, assuming they were still there, would have been wiped away when everybody bombed the Upside Down in episode 8. But according to Kali, the women and the babies were already sick and gonna die anyway, but it's still a pretty grim thought. I hope somehow those women got out. I don't know if they did. We learned that Eleven's mother, Terry Ives, was the first successful candidate of this plan to infuse Henry Creel's blood into a pregnant woman, hoping that the child would fully have his powers. And that's why 11 was more successful than 2 through 10. Some of this was suggested in the play Stranger Things: The First Shadow, which I broke down in this video. Notably, when a news headline in the final act puts out a call for pregnant women for a government study, presumably these women that Kali found were a continuation of that program. Henry catches Derek in the woods.
I will kill your fool of a father, your sneak of a mother, and that bitch of a sister, too.
Damn, why go after Tina like that? These are also the 3 familial relationships that Henry Creel had when he was a kid. A fool of a father, a snake of a mother, and I guess a bee of a sister. I don't know. Alice didn't seem that mean. But the way Henry turns Derek's head is actually similar to the way Will force Vecna's head around. Holly and Max revisit the schoolyard memory and smash through the merry-go-round through the mirror into Holly's bedroom on the night of the recent demo attack. Meanwhile, the others enact their plan to electrify the dead demo.
Let her up, Frankenstein.
It's Mouse Frankenstein.
Robin is referencing Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein.
My name, it's pronounced Frankenstein.
Will taps into the frying demo to access the hive mind to realize what Vecna is doing with the lost kids and currently hunting Max and Holly. Max and Holly get trapped in the Wheeler house memory as Henry descends the stairs. I love this shot of him rapidly toggling between his Mr. Whatsit appearance and his blood-stained Rainbow Room uniform, as if he's like glitching on how he would present himself to Holly versus Max, since they're now both in a room together. But now he's just like, screw it, and takes his final Vecna form. Vecna now chokes Max, hoping for a rematch against her after season 4. He now has these armored up claws on his shoulder. That was part of the artery that she tore out to get away from him in season 4. But Will hacks in and breaks Vecna's leg, and he turns Vecna's head to tell the others,
Max, you need to run!
I like how in the trailer version of this shot they hid this reveal by not whiting out Will's eyes. Dustin finds Dr. Martin Brenner's old notebook and finds Brenner's sketch of the exotic matter, and many noted that it looks a lot like the drawing of the chaotic hex matter from Arcane in season 2 episode 7. This is the matter that's used to control time. Nancy blasts the exotic matter sphere with her shotgun, which takes us to season 5 episode 6, Escape from Camazotz. We see the smoke trail of Nancy's shotgun looking like some Mind Flayer smoke seeping out, laughing at these mortals for thinking they found its heart. I also love the look Nancy gives here.
Maybe you missed?
The exotic matter explodes and sends shockwaves outward toward the wall, and now we know this sphere was not anything Vecna or the Mind Flayer created. It's just a natural scientific anomaly created when Dr. Brenner's experiments on 11 first created the Upside Down. It's this anomalistic exotic matter that holds the whole wormhole bridge of the Upside Down together. We learned that Mr. Clark has been hooking up with Marissa, the librarian. Marissa returning from her appearances in season 1 and season 2 and season 4. Remember in season 1, we learned that Hopper had a history with her. Now Mr. Clark is making his move.
Yep.
Dustin explains that the whole Upside Down is actually a bridge wormhole leading to the abyss dimension, and explains what the exotic matter really is, and we see how Nancy shooting it caused the matter of the lab to melt. As to what this goo really is, here's what the Duffers told Variety. They said the backstory is that when the exotic matter or dark matter is disturbed, it disrupts the environment around, in this case the lab, causing it to melt. You can think of it like the sun. The exotic matter is circular, and when it dies down over time, the melting slows and stops. Steve's BMW gets sucked into the nothingness on the other side of the wormhole wall, and I cannot say enough how much much I love a big, well-designed depiction like this. It's like the Yggdrasil time tree in Loki. Just give us a big map of where and what everything is. Specifically the choice to make the Hawkins dimension and the abyss above, or is it the abyss below and Hawkins dimension above? We don't know. It's all relative. It doesn't matter. But both take the shape of concentric circles of an entire galaxy or an entire universe, showing us how it's not just the town of Hawkins, Indiana that's being bridged to, or just that part of the abyss. It's two entire universes on each end of this bridge. This episode was written by Kate Treffery, who co-wrote the play Stranger Things: The First Shadow, and other than the Duffers, she seems to be the closest collaborator when it comes to the lore of the series. When Henry chases Max and Holly to the caves, I love how he still has that limp from the leg injury that Will caused. Now it's Robin's turn to do a planned pitch speech using some stupid props. She uses the Clash album to represent Will and the Tiffany album for Holly, and Kate Bush, of course, for Max. So from this, she deduces that Max has not been in a coma, but just in a trance, with her mind trapped in Henry's mindscape. That's where Will is now, in his memory of the upside down library from the prologue scene in episode 1 when Vecna first implanted him. Vecna tells Will that Will was always his spy, his builder, that Vecna used Will to dig those tunnels in season 2. And now in Vecna's hive structure, the Mind Flayer's heart above him beats heavily, as for the first time we see the upside down version of the abyss with red fissures forming on the surface as it prepares its descent. Vecna hijacks Will's mind to trace Will's memories back to Will visiting Max with Lucas to learn where Max's physical body is. Jonathan and Nancy find themselves in a melting room, having fallen down into it from the roof above. A nice little detail showing how they are definitely at risk to aristocrats down through every floor of this melting building until they are just stuck in the goo. Hey, at least one of our season 5 theories was right. The lens cap of Henry's Captain Midnight telescope with its interesting shaped aperture was intentional to match up with the cave opening to give Holly the spot of Henry's traumatic Nevada memory.
And marks the spot.
Now, some people were clowning on this as a cringy Rise of Skywalker thing, but both this example and the Rise of Skywalker ultimately got it from the Goonies, which was one of the 80s Amblin kids adventure stories that inspired Stranger Things. And also, it's not that lame for a treasure hunting subplot. Like, all of this in the Mindscape isn't in the real world anyway. It's just manifestations of Henry Creel's imagination and memory. Hopper and Mike build a salinated tank in the cabin, and Eleven suits up in what will be the last outfit she'll ever wear, this wetsuit. Mike gets Eleven to tell the truth by reminding her friends don't lie. Of course, their trust phrase from season 1. I don't know if it's Sean Levy's angles or the lighting of the scene or what, but the reaction shots of Millie Bobby Brown do not do the actress any favors. Robin tries to tell Vicky the truth and says the Earth is split in 4, which is a recurring description used by characters this season referring to the 4-way rift of the Max Z, but in reality, there are actually 4 zones at play here. There's the Hawkins right side up, the real world. There's a Hawkins upside down, just the upside down as we've known it, but there's also the Abyss version of the upside down, and there's the Abyss right side up. Jonathan and Nancy, facing death by goo, are finally honest with each other. Nancy says she hates the Clash. Jonathan hates reading her articles. Nancy never read Slaughterhouse-5. She just read the cliff notes and pretended to like it. Hey, maybe a veiled reference by the Duffer Brothers that they're not that into time travel fiction. Nancy hates when Jonathan is high. He hates it when she's drunk. Jonathan never replied to Emerson, and they realized that they were never really right for each other. They just kind of had their shared trauma in common. And I really love an emotionally honest breakup scene instead of the random coupling off that YA high fantasy fiction tends to do. Look at you, Harry Potter. Neville and Luna? What? So now Jonathan can properly unpropose to Nancy.
Which is why it has been sitting like a cannonball in my pocket for the last 2 days.
Hey, Cannonball was the Marvel mutant Charlie Heaton played in The New Mutants, and miraculously science rewards these two beings not being suckered in by romantic cliche by solidifying the goo before these two drown. Holly and Max find Henry's traumatic memory that was referenced in the play, finding a scientist who had escaped from Dr. Brenner's Nevada project to recreate the Philadelphia experiment, a scientist who's actually a spy working for the Russians who stole some mysterious piece of technology. All we learned in the play is that the scientist was found dead, and whatever he stole filled Henry with mind flayer particles that transported Henry to the abyss for 12 hours. Now we learn that this scientist spy shot Henry in the hand and tried to shoot the kid again, but young Henry beats him to death with a rock, and as we'll see in the final episode, open the briefcase to find some mystery item that contains part of the mind flayer. The Duffers wouldn't say exactly what this rock is, but indicated that it would be explored in their spin-off series. No, that spin-off will not be Hopper and Joyce and Montauk, as good of an idea as I think it would be. It won't have any of the Stranger Things characters. It's going to be in a different decade, but in the same world as the show. So that tells us that this rock, or whatever it is not mind flayer specific, but some kind of technology or mineral that experimental scientists of all kinds use to contain, I guess, the essence of cosmic beings. Now, an interesting detail here, on Henry Creel's Boy Scout uniform, his troop number is 1106, as in 11/6, November 6th. It could be a random Easter egg, but considering we never got a firm answer on the significance of November 6th, other than it being the anniversary of what Henry went through on the night of the play in 1959, a detail that you would only know by watching the play or our YouTube video breaking it down, this being the the first instance that we know of 1106 in Henry's life does make us wonder why this cursed number recurs throughout his life. Vecna sends the demo dogs to the hospital for Max, and suddenly Vicky realizes Robin was telling the truth about everything. Robin intercoms to Lucas to get Max out, and Karen Wheeler overhears it. Lucas does not get enough credit for the "This is Sparta" kick that he delivers to the demagogue trying to get into the elevator. Our man does not skip leg day. Also remember, he's deadlifting Max here. Max is comatose. She's not putting her arm on his shoulder to counterbalance the weight. It is not easy to lift a comatose body. I'm only speaking from the personal experience of a sketch I had to shoot where I had to lift someone being a dead body and they were not able to help at all. And I'm like, oh God, 100 pounds is heavier than it seems. The four kids hide in the laundry room basement, a scene recalling the raptors in the kitchen in Jurassic Park. But those pressurized O2 tanks that Karen saw in her room, somehow she knows exactly what part of the laundry room the demagogues and not the kids she's trying to save will be walking past in the precise moment, and luckily just blows the demo dogs to hell. So this victorious moment takes some of the pressure off of Max and Holly in the red zone, because yeah, Max's speech goes on for quite some time for two characters desperate to escape Camazotz. Seriously, Lucas is holding whatever Sadie Sink's weight is as dead weight for like 10 minutes, waiting around for this pep talk to end. But yes, Max empowers Holly to use her own Holly the Heroic figurine to open her own rift back to her physical body. It's kind of a shame that when Holly wakes up from this positive moment, it's in an even more nightmarish reality than that Tiffany fashion show and heart and soul snackathons that she was doing in Henry's mind house. On to episode 7, The Bridge. When Max awakens, we hear Moby's "When It's Cold I'd Like to Die" lyrics by Mimi Goes, a track that we heard in season 1 when Will was almost lost, but Hopper saved him, and then in season 4 when Max was almost lost, but Eleven saved her. Holly, meanwhile, wakes up to something not as fun: Vecna's hive in the abyss, technically the bowels of the Mind Flayer. And when we see it outside, it's a claw structure with its extremities curled upward. It's just the sleeping physical kaiju form of the Mind Flayer. And with all the claws pointed up, it looks really cool. And here in this desert landscape, it does look rather like the Skeesis Castle from The Dark Crystal, the exact poster that was shown in Mike's bedroom in season 1, episode 2. We no longer see any Demogorgons or Demo Bats here in the abyss like Henry Creel saw when Eleven sent him here. My thinking was that they might have just reassimilated back into the Mind Flayer's kaiju form, or maybe they're just in a seasonal life cycle and they regenerate from those pustules that Steve and the others were jabbing on the underbelly. But in interviews, the Duffers were just like, nah, the Demogorgons are just somewhere off screen in the abyss. I don't know. But if that's the case, why the Mind Flayer didn't summon his deadly foot soldiers to help him in this crucial final battle? Or at least to just keep Will distracted? I don't know. And when Dustin and Steve rescued Nancy and Jonathan, Dustin and Nancy hug. And we're kind of reminded of the crush Dustin had on Nancy in season 1 that got paid off with their dance at the end of season 2. Holly crawls through a crack in the abyss terrain and comes out through the floor of the abyss upside down. So I suppose all the rifts that formed in the surface of the right side up Hawkins were mirrored by similar rifts on the abyss surface as Vecna was readying both worlds to collide into each other. I'm not sure why the upside down version of the abyss surface doesn't have its own gravity to keep Holly from falling. Like Holly immediately falls up, taken by the Hawkins upside down gravity. My thinking was maybe the wormhole of the upside down only has gravity that goes one way, and it's from the dimension that first opened the rift to the other side and created the wormhole. And since the upside down was formed by Dr. Brenner's experiments with Eleven, that's the direction the gravity goes. With the help of Mr. Clark, they're able to locate Dustin using telemetry signals in the upside down, and they meet in a parking lot outside the Hawkins lab, and they even bring Mr. Clark down with them to the upside down, which must have blown this teacher's mind since he was the one who first explained this theoretical concept to the kids with a paper plate back in season 1. They all resurface, and Dustin explains how the whole upside down is a wormhole bridge that leads to another dimension that he is coining the Abyss after D&D. The Abyss in D&D lore is known as the birthplace of demons, a violent, malevolent realm, a chaotic, evil universe. And I love Joe Keery's extra reaction at the end of this exchange.
It's too big, it's not gonna fit.
Steve hears that all the time and he goes in anyway, don't you, Steve?
What the hell's wrong with you?
It's funny. Everybody shut up. Look, if somebody else...
Now it's Steve's turn to pitch a plan with props using a flashlight and a slinky to propose Operation Beanstalk, allowing the Abyss layer to descend through the upside down to the top of the Squawk radio tower and then climb up through a rift in the Abyss to stop Vecna. Dustin adds that they should time a bomb to go off by the exotic matter to destroy the upside down, the Abyss, and anything left inside. Kali says she's gonna come too.
We can end our brother together.
On the close-up of Kali holding her hand, we see Hopper's daughter's Sarah blue bracelet on Elle's wrist, meaning this is another sister who's going to be present in this final fight in some shape or form. Holly tries to get away from the other kids, smacking Mary with the stereo, and Thomas goes to Hallmark movie villain real fast. As their main group prepares for their final crawl, there's an interesting shot of Will framed perfectly in the exotic matter sphere of the upside-down wormhole that Dustin drew. This episode's title is The Bridge, and I think looking back, we can see how Will might view himself as the exotic matter of the bridge who's really causing all of this. Robin and Mike argue about what record to time the bomb trigger to. Mike wants to use Butthole Surfers, and Robin wants a real soundtrack. And we know she'll later win this argument when the episode 8 track that they use is Prince's When Doves Cry, but since it then goes into Purple Rain, she really did use a soundtrack album for Prince's Purple Rain 1984 film. It's a big deal that the Duffers were able even to license any Prince music, since the late artist and his estate have been very litigious about any usage of his music. So it was a big win for Netflix to use the first ever usage of Purple Rain in a TV show. I'm sure it helped when Netflix was able to say, hey, look what we did for Kate Bush. And sure enough, after this finale aired, Purple Rain and When Doves Cry shot up to the top of the charts. Dustin gives Steve a weapon that Eddie Munson used in Eddie and Dustin's fight against a demo bat in season 4. That serrated knife on the stick still has some of the blood from that battle stained on it. As they come to terms over what exactly Eddie's friendship and sacrifice meant, they exchange "You die, I die," calling back the line Dustin said to Steve in season 3.
Step back.
No.
Seriously.
No! If you die, I die.
In a psychic link conversation, Kali tells Eleven that the only way to stop the cycle of Dr. K's experiments is for the two of them to stay behind. In my Ending Explained video, one of the many counter arguments to refute the possibility that Eleven is alive is that Eleven and Kali just would not have had that much time to discuss this complex, multi-step plan to fake Kali's death. But I will admit, just to throw you a bone, that there is a possibly deceptive edit right here on Murray snapping the girls out of the psychic link from Honky the Truck. Like right after Kali says the only way, there could have been several more minutes where the girls proposed an alternate path. Will's coming out scene is one of the most scrutinized scenes of the series, in some cases for completely bullshit reasons, but in other cases for very valid reasons from viewers questioning whether now is the best time for this conversation with the world's end imminent, and whether in 1987 someone like Will would get all of these people in a room to share this with them instead of just with Joyce and with Mike. Like, does Will really know Murray and Vicky that well? Well, I will say that Will was probably feeling there was a good chance that he was gonna die in the battle ahead anyway, and as he explained to Joyce, Vecna was weaponizing Will's secret against him. So going into the battle, he probably just want to take the power of that secret completely off the table. So even if it means Murray has to be there to hear it, Murray is still a fellow soldier in this squad, and all members of the squad probably just need to know the secret to keep Vecna from weaponizing it in any form. I'm not going to force you to accept that as an answer. I'm just saying that's probably how Will looked at it. Now, some of the Conformity Gate believers are clinging to this line.
We like biking to Melvalds for malted milkshakes.
Melvalds is a general store where Joyce worked in season 1 in 1983. In the play, it's set in 1959 to 1960, and it's a diner, and they did sell milkshakes back then. So some online are calling this a glitch in the Matrix, a plot hole, holding on to it as part of their theory that there's more to the series, and that all of these season 5 episodes are part of Vecna's mind illusion, and that only Vecna would consider Melvalds a place that still sold milkshakes. All I can say is that many of us 80s and 90s kids grew up with family-owned general stores and pharmacies in our neighborhoods that kept milkshake counters on one side of the store. Like, you know how some Targets nowadays have a Starbucks attached to them where you could get a frap with whipped cream? Well, imagine that, but like a smaller version, a store where you could get groceries and batteries and shampoo and diapers and stuff, but over in the corner there's a counter where you can still get malted milkshakes. I swear this was a thing. It's only viewers of a certain generation who consider this weird. As Murray charges at the Max Z gate, Mr. Clark opens it remotely saying, "Melon." A reference to the Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, the answer to the riddle that Gandalf deciphers to open the doors of Durin, as it is the Sindarin Elvish word for friend.
What's the Elvish word for friend?
Melon.
Nancy lays down suppressive fire and kills at least 3 soldiers. I have no idea how any of these kids walked away from this without any legal consequences. Episode 7 ends with Henry lighting candles and joining the 12 Vessel kids in the ritual to begin the descent of the abyss, bringing us to the final episode. Season 5, Episode 8, The Right Side Up. The last shot before the credits is a view from the abyss level down at the surface level of the Hawkins side of the Upside Down, where we can see the 4 rift lines that we saw forming on the right side up of Hawkins at the end of season 4. But the opening credit sequence here is considerably shorter for this episode, with an alternate music arrangement by the composers because they left off the names of the cast from the opening sequence, and it's because they also released this episode theatrically, and movies typically do not have introductory title sequences, at least not anymore, and that's why this episode ends with the elaborate title sequence in the D&D user's manual. Still though, I think anyone who did see this in theaters would have given the 60 seconds of the iconic opening title sequence a standing ovation. Now, as I go into this finale, I'm going to be addressing some of the details and loose ends brought up up by the Conformity Gate movement online. This is a group of fans who believe that various inconsistencies are all pointing to a secret 9th episode, or perhaps an additional 5th season that's gonna be released by Netflix, and that everything that happens in this finale that we saw was actually an illusion by Vecna. It's also kind of a catch-all theory for everyone who refuses to accept the Duffers' unsatisfying answers in various interviews. Hopper takes Elle and Kali back to the upside-down version of the water tank where Dr. Brenner placed Elle to first open the rift to the upside down. This is another Conformity Gate detail, the fact that there's this much water in the upside down when all other times it seemed completely drained of water. And while I brought up the absence of water in past videos, that detail was not really something the Duffers ever explicitly highlighted. Hopper radios Murray.
Nice work, Bald Eagle.
Bald Eagle was Murray's call sign back in season 3. Elle and Kali psychically link with Max, who takes them to the part of Henry's mind that store the memory from November 6, 1959. This is a time period from the play, and again, you can watch our play breakdown here, and Max drops even more references to the play right here.
And through that door, Hop's sneaking a joint, and that way, Mr. Wheeler is feeling up Mrs. Wheeler.
One of the recurring gags in the play is how Ted Wheeler and Karen Wheeler are horny as hell and always making out and probably doing other stuff. Max takes them to an additional scene from the play, backstage during Joyce's production Dark of the Moon, during the demonic dance sequence. It was during this climactic dance in the play within play that Henry Creel was up in the rafters arguing with Patty Newby and Dr. Brenner. Now, the actor wearing the shaggy coat and the antlers that they pass, whom Elle does a double take on, is actually a young version of Bob Newby, Sean Astin's character, when he fills in for Henry Creel's part as the witch boy when Henry's a no-show. Now, Max must know that this closing curtain during the traumatic argument happening for Henry upstairs is a shortcut back to the Creel house, so we get this tense crescendo of the chanting of Joyce's play with the abyss upside down crashing into the squawk radio tower antenna. But then they get to the Creel house and Eleven breaks the trance, launching Henry out the window, stopping the descent. So why does this November 6, 1959 memory from the play even need to be in the series? I will admit, I thought the finale would go more into that history than it ended up going. The Duffers used it mostly as a setting within Henry's mindscape just to get from point A to point B. But I suppose by Max seeing Henry Creel's name on the play flyer, she saw that he was once just a kid who got along with other kids well enough to be a drama nerd, even after he got infected by the Mind Flayer in Nevada. But you know, all that empathy kind of goes out the window when Joyce hacks his head off. The others climb up through the abyss rifts, and as they explore the yellow-tinted rocky terrain that looks like it's in the background of Linkin Park's In the End music video, something I only mean as a compliment, Dustin notes that there's no demos in sight. When the Duffers were asked where all the Demogorgons and Demobats were during this final battle, they said that Vecna just didn't anticipate that the group would bring the battle to his home turf. He was caught off guard, and he didn't have all the demo foot soldiers lined up in time. This is definitely something the Conformity Gates are holding on to, but I equate it with the Game of Thrones producers Benioff and Weiss saying that Daenerys Targaryen forgot about Aegon's fleet. Like, the real answer is dozens of CGI Demogorgons would require an even bigger budget than just one big Mind Flayer kaiju. Kali casts an illusion to convince the Vessel kids that Mr. Whatsit is the monster, and after the kids escape, Kali tries to stab him, but Vecna teleports to Hopper, haunting Hopper with tanks of 1966 herbicide. This comes from Hopper's monologue to Dimitri in season 4, when he mixed Agent Orange in Vietnam as a young man, and how he and other vets came home with side effects that he now blames for the condition that his daughter Sarah got. Now we see orange gas pumping in as Hopper now revisits inhaling those fumes, and as Hopper rounds a corner, he now sees Sarah in her hospital bed. Vecna now shows Hopper Kali and Elle's conversation about sacrificing themselves, leading Hopper to shoot wildly at Vecna and making Hopper think that he shot Elle in the tank. Now, I have some questions as to why Vecna didn't just actually let Hopper kill Elle here in the physical world. Like, it would have been just as effective as tricking him with the illusion of that, if not even more effective. One detail that I liked about this episode, though, is that there are certain times when characters in the Mindscape shout and it has this echo effect. And it's just a cool little way of reminding us that they are in Henry's mind and sound reverberates differently through this fake air. Mike wants a gun from Nancy and she gives him a flare gun, but hey, he will end up weaponizing this flare gun in the final battle. As Henry overcomes his pain and crosses into the cave, we do hear the scientist he killed repeating, "Resist it," the final message of warning that Henry refused to heed. I found it interesting that while Holly leads the Vessel kids away, both when they first enter the mine shaft and then when they crawl through the cave-in part, she has Debbie go first, then Thomas. Both times, that order. I wonder if it's the girl she's known longest, followed by the tallest boy who could help the others. Yes, the tallest boy who did kick her and call her a B. Akers' crew meanwhile mounts a Hedgehog sonic cannon on a helicopter, disabling Elle and Kali and allowing Akers to detain Hopper and Kali, but Murray drops an explosive on the helicopter and Akers gets a shot off, one that ends up hitting Kali. 11 forces Akers to shoot himself, and Kali bleeds out. And of course, this is a very important moment that we have to reanalyze. The 11 Lives believers all want to go with Mike's theory that Kali didn't actually die eye right here that she lived long enough to cast the illusion later to make us think that 11 was standing there in the rift. The conformity gate folks have co-opted this as well. Even though Kali is capable of illusion casting, Kali's final words to 11 happen when Hopper leaves the room, meaning she and Elle would be giving that performance for an audience of each other who would be in on the secret. Also, they would have had to perfectly plan the trajectory of Akers' bullet and know ahead of time that Akers would have captured them. I mean, I'm just saying, this theory would require a degree of 4D chess from characters and writers who have never planned things that masterfully. But I will give you this, when Murray asks 11 and Hopper what happened to Kali, this is Elle's response.
Elle, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, all cried out, I guess. Look, maybe there are other reasons Millie Bobby Brown seems to have a limited emotional range on her face this season. And hey, maybe the way TV actors' contracts require them to not undergo cosmetic changes between seasons for things like facial hair, tattoos, piercings. Maybe there are other things celebrities are doing nowadays that actors should be required to hold off doing until the project wraps. Really, I gotta say, this is my least favorite part of media analysis, and I'm only bringing it up because it's a major talking point in the reaction to this series. So that's all I'm gonna say about it, and I'm gonna move on. In Henry's memory, when young Henry finds a stolen rock containing part of the Mind Flayer, Henry hears the Mind Flayer's voice calling to him from his smoky shadow form in the abyss. And the scientist says,
Resist it. It will consume you. It will consume all.
I think the use of the word consume and the way Jonathan uses it to title this film later suggests to me that the Mind Flayer and Vecna's ultimate plan to merge the worlds is really just all about consumption. Like the Mind Flayer just has this instinct to devour everything. Will tells Henry that the Mind Flayer used him like a vessel, but Henry corrects him.
It has never controlled me, and I never controlled it. I could have resisted it, but I chose to join it.
And in this sequence, we flash back to Henry playing with a spider in season 4. So suddenly the Mind Flayer's true form, really, we realize it's just a spider with his legs curled up so that those legs now unfurl into this giant arachnid kaiju. Hey, say what you will about the concept of this final battle, but I love this creature design and its otherworldly Lovecraftian textures. And it also looks like the creature might still have a scar down the middle of his face that 11 gave the Mind Flayer's smaller form during their battle at the cabin in season 3. The Mind Flayer kaiju nearly eats the group, but it gets walloped by a massive boulder thrown by 11. I mean, considering the scale of that rock and the wide shot, 11 threw like a 2 to 3 story stone building at the Mind Flayer's head. Like, we saw this girl struggling to overturn a semi-truck. This thing would be like 4 times the weight of that semi-truck. 11 puts her training to use and leaps toward the monster's mouth, but then tears open its chest cavity. As the others notice 11's fight with Vecna, weakening the overall Mind Flayer kaiju, and discuss a battle plan to draw it into the canyon to target its hit points, I just noticed something on rewatch. We do not see Will in any of the shots of this scene. Like when the Duffers were asked whether everyone hurting Vecna and the Mind Flayer in this battle would have been felt by Will, since Will is still linked to the hive mind, the answers the Duffers gave that they got some heat for is just that the camera doesn't cut to Will that much during the battle, but that he was probably still feeling a lot of it. It's kind of a goofy answer, but sure enough, when you rewatch it right here in this scene, we do not see Will in close-up ever. And it's kind of funny to think that while they're all talking about hit points, that poor kid's convulsing on the ground screaming in pain. Like seriously, we don't see Will at all when the battle heats up until that sudden moment when he shows up to help 11. Nancy acts as bait and reloads her assault rifle. So some gun experts online were mocking this as a mistake. Like it kind of seems like Nancy is reloading the weapon by pulling the charging handle, which has nothing to do with reloading the gun. But this guy, Desmond Oliver on X, made a video explaining how Nancy might just be hitting the bolt release on the other side of the gun that we don't see. I don't know, I'm not an expert here. I'm not gonna start shit with people who know guns better than I do, but just watch that guy's video. Lucas flings a water balloon filled with gas via his slingshot. He was the one who used the slingshot on the Demogorgon in the season 1 finale, and Mike uses that flare gun to ignite it. Dustin and Steve, meanwhile, run beneath the kaiju to use Eddie's spears to stab the pustules that squeal in a specific way that make me think that these would have hatched into something awful. So outside, the kids bring down the kaiju, while inside, Will and 11 break off Vecna's arm and impale Vecna on this fang thing. They tear Holly and the other kids from the flesh walls. I guess all these kids made it through that cave-in and from the red zone found their own happy place rifts to get back to their physical bodies. Joy steps in to decapitate Vecna using her axe. Yes, the same tool that she took to her living room wall to find her son in season 1. While she does, she remembers the trauma she suffered from seeing Will nearly die to seeing Bob Newby actually die. And Joyce says,
fucked with the wrong family.
Hey, that's the first and only fuck of the series. Meanwhile, Jimmy Campbell Bower said in an interview that Vecna's final words as he's gurgling blood were actually going to be, "Please don't." With each strike, all the characters flash back to the trauma that Vecna and his various linked horrors caused them. And for Nancy, hey, Barb makes it in. Meanwhile, Joyce makes no reference to recognizing her old classmate Henry Creel at any point in the series. The Duffers told Variety that Joyce and Hopper did probably realize that Vecna was their old classmate during that 18-month gap, but it just happened off screen. They said to have Joyce and Hopper start talking about it would have just been confusing for viewers who did not see the play. But to that I say, guys, you put the 1959 play flyer in the season with all these characters' names. Like, you didn't have to go to the 1959 high school at all. So I don't know. So they use Prince's When Doves Cry as a countdown track, and everyone rides in the truck back through the Upside Down. Now, some Conformity Gate believers are claiming 11 was never on that truck, specifically pointing to Derek Turnbow's weird wave to Mike. That could be a clue that 11 isn't actually there sitting next to Mike. But here in this shot, right before the wave, you do see 11 holding onto Mike's arm with both hands, and he's clearly reacting to that physical touch. So the fact that the illusion is just sight and sound based tells us that 11 was actually sitting there. She's not an illusion here on the truck. But outside, they're stopped by Dr. K's forces, and here's the part, again, we have to watch very closely. We do see 11 pulled off the truck, but the camera cuts away. Some Conformity Gate believers are sharing this shot from the making of documentary trailer showing Millie Bobby Brown running in the opposite direction from the Upside Down rift, when in the scene, 11 was supposed to be invisible. Now I'm saying this was a behind the scenes shot. This would be what cameras showing the cameras were taping of the actress running across the set. But either way, they're saying that this is again proof that Elle is still alive. Either way, don't try to tell these believers that the Duffers shot this for Mike's theoretical version of events. They're gonna come at you with every rationale possible that you are wrong, because I'm telling you, they care about this show more than you ever possibly could. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a scary thing. Either way, media literacy is dead. But even though the hedgehogs are active, we do see 11 on the other side of the rift. And Mike breaks away from the soldier, and some folks are saying that this random soldier just weirdly knows Mike's name. Mike. But that's not the soldier saying Mike, it's Dustin saying Mike. 11 somehow allows Mike to psychically link with her mind, and we hear the next track on the Prince album, Purple Rain, as Mike and 11 flash back to their time together, and the first time he saw her, it was in the rain. The D&D figurine on the record hits the fuse, and boom, the exotic matter ignites. It takes out the lab, the high school, the Wheeler house, and also, according to the Duffers, all of those pregnant women. Ugh. And then 11, with one final breath, gets taken out too. This is a similar exhale that 11 breathes before the blackout upon defeating Vecna. It's a sigh of relief. But then, upon Mike's tear-stricken face, we cut to black and we hear, and Netflix closed captions confirm it, this. I think this rhythmic beating might just be Mike's hope, hearing the possibility that 11 could still be alive. It's now 18 months later, the library is being rebuilt, and a monument brushes everything off as a great earthquake. Fleetwood Mac's Landslide plays over Robin, catching us up on what happened. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is playing at the Hawkins Hawk, a story about giving up immortal life and riding off into the sunset. Steve is now coaching the baseball team, where Derek Turnbow is catcher. If you listen closely, Steve is cheering on Thomas, who I assume is the pitcher. Yes, the same Thomas who pushed Holly and called her a bee. I will never forget. Similar to the pilot episode where Joyce called Karen looking for Will, now it's Karen calling Joyce looking for Mike. Hopper finds Mike by the library. He's back as chief of police, somehow after being imprisoned in a Russian prison and being presumed dead and killing a ton of soldiers this season. At the graduation, we see how Karen Wheeler is proudly showing off the scars she got from the Demogorgon instead of hiding them. It's a really fun detail until we get to the final scene where she calls down from the stairs and no longer has those scars. In addition to that, the Conformity Gate believers are harping on the fact that this graduation would be in late spring or early summer, but the leaves on the trees definitely make it autumn. Also, Max is somehow graduating despite being in a coma for 2 years. Dustin's rebellious valedictorian speech is actually the same plan that Eddie Munson said he was going to do back in season 4, episode 1.
I'm going to look Principal Higgins dead in the eye. I'm going to flip him the bird. I'm gonna snatch that diploma and I'm gonna run like hell out of here.
That's what Dustin does to Principal Higgins here, after ripping off his robe to reveal the shirt that affirms Eddie's reputation with Hellfire Lives. Or if you squint your eyes and just look at the E and the L of Hellfire, you can make it into L Lives. Mike hears the feedback on the speakers and suddenly gets the idea that with the Kryptonite hedgehogs activated, Elle should not have been able to bring Mike into her mind via psychic link. Stacy returns to invite Dustin to her party. This is the same Stacy who turned down Dustin to dance in the season 2 finale, and then had that moment with 11 at the Starcourt Mall in season 3. The older kids reunite on the roof of the Squawk. We learn that Steve is also teaching sex ed. Jonathan's at NYU Film School making a movie called The Consumer. The more she eats, the hungrier she gets, which I think also sheds light on what the Mind Flayer was ultimately just trying to do, eat. Robin is at Smith College, and later during her toast she mentions overbearing significant others, and the Duffers did say that she and Vicky broke up off screen. Nancy was at Emerson College but dropped out to work at the Herald, and the four of them pledged to meet once a month at Robin's uncle's place in Philly. And while I thought this was nice, as someone who has made similar deals with old friends, those of us of a certain age just know that that's not gonna happen every month. Hopper and Joyce finally get their date at Enzo's. Hopper brings up a new job in Montauk, which is a reference to the Duffers' original project, Montauk, which would have been about the conspiracy theory centered around the coastal New York town in the 80s at a decommissioned Air Force base. The Duffers reconceived Montauk into their pitch to Netflix for Stranger Things. Hopper proposes to Joyce, and hey, I think he's using the same ring that Jonathan got for Nancy. Hey, rings aren't cheap, why not repurpose it? The final scene is a recreation of the opening scene of the series, starting with a close-up of the sprinkler in the Wheeler front yard. Yes, the same shot the pilot episode opened with. And we're back in a D&D game hosted once again by Dungeon Master Mike, just like before. But this time the villain is not the Demogorgon, it's the vampire lord, Strahd von Zarevich. Max rages at their apparent loss, but then Dustin remembers the mage from the Abbey of St. Markovia, who said that they could summon her at any time if they remembered the incantation. Of course, this is Mike just telling his friends to never forget 11. When Mike talks them through the final beats, Dustin says, a callback to his catchphrase in season 4, both in episode 6. Boom! And then later when they were looking up through the rift in episode 7. Then Mike talks them through each of their hypothetical epilogues. Lucas and Max get that movie date that they talked about in season 4 that became the source of the drawing over Max's hospital bed. Dustin goes to a college and sits at a table where someone definitely has very similar hair to Eddie Munson. Maybe that's why he chose that spot. Will moves to the city and meets a boyfriend, and I think that might be a cameo by Ross Duffer in the background. Mike's own epilogue is to become a writer, telling stories inspired by his experiences, an ending very similar to the final scene of Stand By Me. You could also imagine the Duffers probably feel this way. Also, if you look closely, you can see a photo of 11 on Mike's desk. Then Mike shares his theory that 11 did not die, that due to those kryptonite hedgehogs, she would not have been able to use her powers to bring Mike into her psychic link. Mike theorizes that what they thought was 11 was really just Kali, casting an illusion from very far away, while 11, invisible, snuck away into the nearby Radio Shack. And then the glitching on 11's hand was proof that it was just a smokescreen. So instead, Mike imagines 11 hiking in a place that looks like Iceland to his dreamed of place with the 3 waterfalls. Now, some of the Conformity Gate goons were like, hey, I only see 2 waterfalls, but no. 11 passes a 3rd one before she reaches the peak where the other 2 are. There are a total 3. I also like the detail how Mike imagines 11 wearing a jean jacket over the pink top, just like how she wore a jean jacket over her pink dress in season 1. Max asks,
This is just a theory, right?
How do we know it's true? We don't.
So the Duffer Brothers clearly wanted this to be left open for interpretation, and they gave us just enough evidence like the hedgehogs and the rhythmic beating to give the fan theory some validity. But equally valid, since the explosion started at the lab where Kali was, Kali would have been long gone by the time that explosion reached the supposed illusion of 11. You could also look at the detail that 11's nose wasn't bloody when she was supposedly using her powers. Look, I think it's okay to believe that 11 is still alive, but I personally think it's a better ending for this D&D nerd to just have kind of a hopeful fan theory that he knows probably isn't true, the same way that alternate versions of this show might exist in the headcanons of some of you viewers. I do wish though that the Duffer Brothers did not in interviews lean any which way, because they have said that 11 needed to quote go away in order for the magic to leave the world of the show. But ultimately there's nothing wrong with believing, and that's why I think everyone in this campaign chooses to believe as well. But I do think deep down they know what actually happened. But one by one the characters put their character binders on the shelf, and you can totally tell here it's each of these actors putting the binders where their scripts were probably contained for table reads on the shelf symbolically one last time. Now, some crazy fans are trying to make something out of the grid of letters on the sides of the binders, forming phrases like X lie, I guess as in Dimension X was a lie, or the X-shaped rift was a lie. To that I say, why that phrase and not music? But now Holly takes over the basement for her own D&D campaign with Mary, Debbie, her crush Josh, and delightful Derek. And we hear Mary say, Mike watches on like Andy in Toy Story 3, and he closes the door, and we fade to black on the basement door. The credits feature David Bowie's Heroes, finally after all the Peter Gabriel covers, and I love how these titles take the form of Mike's D&D notebook and the user manual, showing various iconic shots throughout the series. And when it all ends, the user manual closes, and we see the D20 die showing 7. Yes, 7 is a number Will rolled in the very first episode when facing the Demogorgon in the game, and the dice rolled off the board.
It was a 7. Huh? The roll. It was a 7. The Demogorgon. It got me.
But for now, let's answer some lingering questions. 1, is 11 alive? This series wants to leave it up to interpretation, which is perfectly on brand for the Duffers as a message to fans to never stop theorizing. Mike's theory does offer some solid clues. The performative nature of 11's sacrifice in a spot where no one in the vicinity would take their eyes off of that spot. The detail of the glitch on 11's fingers, like the glitch Dr. K saw on Collie's hand in episode 5. The rhythmic breathing Netflix definitely wanted us to hear after 11's supposed death. Also, 11 seemed to move on pretty quickly when she and Hopper told Murray about Collie's death, as if Collie might not have been truly dead there. And there's the detail Mike brought up of the hedgehogs that should have affected 11, but I'm gonna argue that it's a better ending if 11 did actually die. And this could actually just be the sad, hopeful theory that Mike uses to keep that door open 3 inches to the possibility that his girlfriend could still be alive. Like, I don't know when 11 and Collie would have had that much time to hatch up a plan with this many steps, because it would have required 11 and Collie to fake Collie's death back at the lab and improvise a performance this good right after Lieutenant Akers got that shot off. It would make 11's killing of Lieutenant Akers way more cold-blooded in retrospect. Maybe you don't care about that. Also, the bomb had already triggered the exotic matter, and the lab got wiped out well before the time Collie would have had to be casting that illusion right up until the last second. Like, Collie's dead. But, you know, with any fan theory cast by a young nerd, 11's survival is not an airtight theory. It's probably not accurate, but it's still fun to think about, and it's perfectly valid to keep as one's headcanon. In the absence of certainty, thematically, it's what Stranger Things has always been all about. Personally, I'm on team 11 is dead, because for a series finale, this world does need to properly change, and 11's existence was the anomalistic factor that made Stranger Things and all of its bad things possible for these characters. So for the world to be properly healed, we really need to remove any possibility that 11 could be found and that her blood could be used for nefarious purposes. But if you think 11 is still alive, good for you. I'm not gonna yuck your yum. 2, what was the Mind Flayer? Well, it turns out it was just an ancient primordial evil native to the Abyss who reached his most powerful state, but also his most vulnerable state by pouring himself into the vessel of Henry Creel. As to what exactly that mysterious rock was that young Henry Creel found in the briefcase, while I assumed it was just a fragment of the Mind Flayer, the Duffers told Variety that the answer to that question is the key to their upcoming live-action spin-off. And since they've said that that spin-off's not going to be so much about Vecna, Mind Flayer, the Abyss, or any of that, I'm guessing Dr. Brenner's experiments had some kind of vessel or container that allowed extra-dimensional anomalies to be contained within it. And maybe there's some kind of MacGuffin mineral that will also make sense in their upcoming spin-off. And then as for why Will Byers was not injured when everybody was attacking the Mind Flayer, which is kind of weird given his physiological hive mind link that should have still been in effect at that point, the Duffers have said in interviews that we didn't always cut to Will during the battle, implying that Will might have been feeling some extreme pain during all of these attacks that we just did not see, and they added that Joyce beheading Vecna was permanently severing that link anyway between Will and the Mind Flayer. I don't know if you accept that as an answer, but it is what they said. 3, why November 6th? The show really seemed to be setting up something by making the night of Joyce and Henry's play November 6, 1959 and November 6, 1987 as the anniversary of Will Byers' disappearance on November 6, 1983. I'll admit I went really hard into the time travel theories, but the show kind of just stopped short at this just being Lucas's theory that the date was just significant to Henry Creel / Vecna for sentimental reasons, maybe connected to his loss of Patty Newby. Again, watch our play breakdown for that. You know, maybe it's kind of like the way serial killers consider personal anniversaries important. 4, why did Vecna need 12 kids exactly? The number 12 seemed less important to Henry Creel's plan as well. It wasn't connected to the 12 spokes of an analog clock. Based on the trance they were all in, I think we might be able to infer that it had some connection to Jesus and the 12 disciples at the Last Supper, but it could also be this number of damaged kids is just what Henry needed for a critical mass of vessels in order to be able to merge the Abyss with the right side up. 5, what about about them plot holes? Will's birthday, Melvald's milkshakes, etc. For years, fans have wondered about various things like this, like why it seemed like the series forgot Will Byers' birthday in season 4. And in season 5, volume 2, remember Will in his coming out scene mentioned remembering getting milkshakes at Melvald's, even though that business that his mom worked at was a general store when Will was alive, not the diner it was in the play. But I don't know, I think a lot of pharmacies, at least in the 80s, still had like a milkshake counter, and maybe that included a certain general store in Indiana that just saw at least the milkshake counter to be a way to make a side profit while people were buying their groceries. I don't know, I think details like this were just more important to the viewers than they were to the producers, and I'm not saying those details or plot holes are not important, and yeah, I would have loved it if the Duffers found some way to address Birthdagate. It just seemed like they had bigger priorities of things to address in this final season. 6. What happened to Vicky and Susie? Well, Robin said that nothing will keep those friends apart, including, quote, overbearing significant others. So I'm thinking Robin and Bricky might have broken up before Robin went to Smith College. Susie, meanwhile, was Dustin's summer camp girlfriend, and yeah, it makes sense to move on with your life. I get with a show like Stranger Things, every side character has their own fandom, but you know, sometimes just people drift out of our lives, and that's okay. 7. Are the Turnbows still tied up somewhere? Yes, I hope so. Every series needs a Huel who's just left behind somewhere. 8. No legal consequences? Like, remember how Robin got in trouble for benzo theft from the hospital? And Erica definitely would have gotten in trouble for poisoning the Turnbows. And then everything with Dr. K just going away? I don't know, guys. I suppose this all just got cleared up in the 18-month time jump. Like, maybe the heroes got pardons after threatening to go public with everything, including all the pregnant moms. And maybe now having Mr. Clark, a respectable member of the community, with this group just gave their story some extra credibility. 9. What's the deal with Montauk? I think the Duffers want to keep the door open to future conspiratorial mysteries faced by Hopper and Joyce. Hey, maybe this is the live-action spinoff they've been talking about that's going to come out on Netflix. Like, the Duffers could get their true Montauk title, a show set in the early 90s, but set in the world of Stranger Things. I mean, you know you watch it. Meanwhile, the animated series Tales from 85 is coming to Netflix later this year, following the main Stranger Things characters on some adventures set between season 2 and season 3. And finally, 10. Did Stranger Things stick the landing? I thought the finale episode, The Right Side Up, lived up to the promise of the series as a whole, and I think this finale understood the audience of this show, for the most part, by just overwhelming viewers like us with nostalgia and teamwork and 80s needle drop and Dungeons and Dragons bits. Is it the best writing of all time? No. Has Stranger Things always been the best writing of all time? No. It's great pop TV. Personally, I loved the ending with Mike's sad fan theory, and if it's more than a theory and 11 is actually still alive, I kind of like it less. I like the idea of just this D&D nerd always having some nerdy Reddit theory of what else might have happened. I think that's such a sweet message for fans. You may not feel that way, but I liked it. I also really love the reveal of the Upside Down as this big, ugly wormhole bridge. It's one of the coolest, most tactile depictions of wormholes we've ever seen. This final season had plenty of iconic moments that are gonna live on as memes. But it wasn't perfect. The finale did not need to be 2 hours long. I guess that's a hard argument to make when many fans wanted more scenes to tie up the loose ends. Personally, I think it was too long. I thought the shift from 11 back to Will in season 5 felt pretty abrupt. I wish Will's coming out scene was not in front of a huge room, including some people he didn't know that well. But ultimately, I feel like Stranger Things evolved to be a completely different show than it was in 2016. And while season 5 did not deliver on the lore questions that were set up in season 4, by the way, I think season 4 was the best season after season 1, season 5 did close the book on the full journeys of these characters, including a pretty impressive tying back in of Kali from season 2. And at the end of the day, it did leave me feeling wistful over this past decade of nerding out with you all over this series. I wish Game of Thrones finale was half this good. So yeah, Stranger Things stuck the landing for me. Maybe not for the show that it was in 2016, but for the very weird show that it became over the past 5 seasons. And now an 11th question that we're gonna add to the end of this compilation. You gotta end with 11 for Stranger Things, right? 11, was this always the ending? In Netflix's One Last Adventure making of documentary for Stranger Things, fans happy with and unhappy with this final season were given a behind-the-scenes look at the development and production process of Stranger Things' final season and how Matt and Ross Duffer, Sean Levy, the cast and crew all went on an emotional roller coaster producing this gargantuan production. Some of the viewers really struggling with these final episodes, looking for directions to point their anger, are doing the thing many unhappy with the Game of Thrones finale did. And no, I'm not talking about a secret mystery additional episode that never existed. No, they're zaprudering through the footage of the final table read, looking for microaggressions on the actors' faces showing that they actually hated it. Like here, you can see Millie Bobby Brown reacting to Eleven's supposed death and shaking her head.
Please. Through sobs at the top of his lungs, he screams.
Oh!
Now, for those of you scratching your head even at the term zaprudering, because I'm realizing a lot of the people angry at the final season and obsessing about it online just tend to be a bit younger, this is a reference to the Zapruder film of the Kennedy assassination and how many conspiracy theorists over the decades have obsessed over that footage with frame-by-frame analysis trying to prove whatever their theory is for who really shot JFK. And to be clear, Millie Bobby Brown in that moment was just shaking her head because she was upset over the emotions of it. She didn't flip ahead to the final pages where Mike shared his D&D theory of how she could still be alive. Meanwhile, others are sharing clips of how many crew people were expressing angst that they started shooting the finale episode before they had a finished script.
We are shooting episode 8, which isn't completely written yet, spoiler alert, so we don't even fully know what's going on.
Now, not to defend the show too much, but hey, this is how a lot of TV is made. It was a 2-hour finale. I'm not surprised that there were certain scenes that they started shooting before that finale script was finished. And while Twitter loves to obsess over this, there are a lot of movies, especially any movie directed by Christopher McQuarrie, that do start shooting without a finished script. It's not great. Line producers hate it. Crew tends to hate it, but it is how a lot of productions are conducted. Also, I gotta say, yeah, it was hard for this final season to get made. And it's actually kind of admirable that the people working on this show released this documentary showing how they struggled. The fact that everyone is attacking them right now for being vulnerable about their struggles isn't a good thing. A lot of you just think that the internet exists just to put our best selves out in front of you. Perfect, pristine final drafts only, please. When the whole purpose of a making of documentary is to show the process evolving and how people were often confused and frustrated. Like, I kind of feel like if they were to release the Hearts of Darkness making of documentary of Apocalypse Now in 2026, you guys would all criticize that as something that never should have been released. But I do have to note that some have noticed that in a close-up of one of the Duffer Brothers laptops while they were writing season 5 episodes in this documentary, tabs open beside the shared Google document where they were outlining the story include one tab for Reddit and 2 tabs for ChatGPT. And those ChatGPT tabs were labeled 50 something, as in 501, 502, the episode numbers. Okay, look, there is nothing wrong with using a shared Google document to outline a script in a professional writer's room. It's how a lot of writers' rooms operate. It's how we operate here at New Rockstars. There's also nothing wrong for having a Reddit tab open or a YouTube tab open. But I do get the criticism that there seem to be 2 ChatGPT tabs open with episode numbers right beside the Google document that they were writing out of. Now, this does not mean that they were necessarily using AI to generate story beats. It could be that they were just using it to organize their plot points by character or just organize their thoughts or organize production timelines. But I also kind of feel that that is something that productions of a budget this size typically would pay a human to organize, either paying a production manager, a line producer, or even a writer's assistant. And you know what? They did name all the writers who were in these brainstorming sessions, and I didn't see a writer's assistant anywhere in there. And being a writer's assistant is traditionally one of the only meritocratic ways to prove yourself and work your way up into being a full-time staff writer. And without that, there are even fewer writing jobs in this industry, and there's practically no upward mobility for writers who just don't happen to be good friends with the showrunners. Look, I don't know what was on those tabs, and I know AI is being used more and more in various industries out there, and a lot of you may be watching this being like, why does New Rockstars keep freaking out about this? But what we are saying is that for this creative part of our very creative industry, there really is no place for AI in a writer's room, especially when Netflix is bankrolling the whole thing. But you know, the fact that it is a tech company like Netflix bankrolling the whole thing might be why people working on this show feel okay using it. Meanwhile, I don't know how much of the people mad about this finale really care about AI, because it seems like half of them are using AI to make slop versions of the final battle that would have included a swarm army of Demogorgons and Will crushing them with a giant boulder. And sure, you could watch that, but hell, if that were in the final episode of Stranger Things, I think we all would have been making fun of that even more. I'll say that what I loved most about this documentary were seeing all the artists doing their work. The camera operators, the costumers, the makeup team, the set builders, the lighting technicians, even the line producer and the budget folks with their post-it notes. And yes, the messy parts of the writing brainstorm process that don't always look that great when you put them on camera for an audience looking for firm answers to story questions, because it makes the Duffers and their team look vulnerable and look human. And that is what they are, folks. And I do applaud these writers for allowing that to be included, even though it's opening them up to scrutiny right now. But here's what's fun about this. On various whiteboards and Google documents where the Duffers were brainstorming alternate ways the story could have gone, we do see some alternate ending ideas there, including there was a version of the final battle in the Abyss where the heroes would have been surrounded by Demogorgons. And this is fascinating because the documentary did include the moment of the writers debating debating whether there should be demogorgons and demobats and demodogs in the abyss and ultimately deciding against it.
There have to be some monsters in the abyss.
I agree.
I maybe feel wonder about demo fatigue at the...
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
Also on that same whiteboard, you can see one story idea showing that Will knocked down the Mind Flayer at a bleak all is lost moment of that battle, and then all the heroes would have gone into the Mind Flayer ribcage or pain tree, as production called it, before 11 even arrived. And Vecna would have attacked this group, and then 11 would have shown up to save all of them. Then there was another whiteboard with notes suggesting an idea of Hopper being potentially aware of 11's fake out death, and then actively working behind the scenes to help 11's deception, which could have given more credence to 11's survival being more than just Mike's D&D theory. You can see Hopper gets out of Humvee alone, underlined, suggesting that he might have been off doing something else for a second, or maybe not. Definitely people were looking at this shot of 11 breaking away from the rest of the group and running in the opposite direction of the rift, something that is visible in the behind the scenes shot, suggesting that they would have wanted it on film, showing her not being invisible, running toward the Radio Shack. But again, what we see here is a shot of the shot, not the shot itself. Also on this whiteboard, it looked like there was a draft idea of Dr. K and Lieutenant Akers killing each other, which could have given more closure to Dr. K's non-ending on the series, and also maybe the military getting wiped out before the characters make it out of the Upside Down and come back into the Max Z, finding the base empty. Also on the whiteboard is a scene where Hopper tends to Kali, and the two of them have a heart-to-heart and form a new plan. So in general, we're kind of getting a sense of a potential alternate ending, like at the Max Z, Hopper potentially knowing 11 would not be returning with them, and when 11 is seen on the other side of the rift, 11 says goodbye with, they write here, happy memory, and then while the Upside Down is destroyed, they just write 11 is gone. They don't write dead, they just write gone. So it's kind of up to you if you want to read the notes this way. I think there were some Stranger Things accounts hyper-focusing on Hopper getting out of the Hummer alone. But in this context, I think the writers might have just wanted a shot of Hopper alone in frame and feeling very alone now as he realizes what exactly 11 is doing. I think it was also interesting how the documentary includes the writers agonizing over how to resolve 11's fate in the finale episode.
You have to keep toying with the audience. Like, is she really gonna go through with this?
If she comes back and has this moment with Hopper and gets in the van, I feel she has clearly made a choice to live.
No.
God, I don't know how to play this.
So again, there are some saying that Netflix never should have released this documentary, but I strongly disagree. Whatever your thoughts are on the final season, I will always appreciate anything that shows how hard the creative process is and how all of the creatives working on something are human and don't always have the answers. And we should never elevate filmmakers and showrunners to be gods of stories. And filmmakers and showrunners should not treat themselves or treat each other as such. Overall, I'm grateful for the journey Stranger Things took me on, and I still think it mostly stuck the ending, even if I do have some gripes with this final season. So thanks for watching this ultimate breakdown compilation of Stranger Things. A special thanks to one of our In Our Underground subscribers, TDSonaQuest, for supporting us at the executive producer level. You can get all of our exclusive bonus content by clicking on the link in the description below or going to nrunderground.supercast.com. Huge thanks to studio tech Brian Kim, New Rockstars editor Joshua Stephen Hurd, and Abby Friel. And you can follow me at EA Voss. Subscribe to all channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.